mortgage.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Central capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Friday, January the 24th in London. Coming up this hour,
Christine Lagarde tells Bloomberg that as the ECB works on its strategic review, policy is still very much up for debate. We'll have more from that Davos interview.
China's death toll rises to 25 from the coronavirus. The government expands its lockdown to 30 million people.
As the coronavirus spreads, Singapore's Prime Minister urges countries to collaborate, and Australian wildfires will push the rise in global carbon dioxide levels past their record. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And Goldman says it won't do business with firms with an all-white or all-male board.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahich. Good morning, everyone. It is coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Lunar New Year kicking off, so we have a lot of markets in Asia closed, Roger, and we're still working out how contained the coronavirus is. The death toll is rising. The WHO decided this time for now not to declare it an issue of a public health emergency of international concern.
Yeah, it's the international line. It's the key. They're saying it's contained for the moment, but they are saying we'll meet again, we'll change our minds if we see evidence to the contrary. But certainly the Chinese government seems to be taking it on very hard, but it's a crucial moment. This is the beginning of the Lunar New Year. People travel, infection travels too.
Yeah, it's the biggest human migration that happens in the year. It's extraordinary. Something like 3 billion trips expected to happen, although some of those might be curtailed because of the travel restrictions. In terms of how the markets are digesting all this, Roger, so global stocks heading for a weekly loss. As I say, a number of markets closed in Asia, including China and Hong Kong. In Europe, we're seeing a bounce back from losses of 0.7% yesterday on the Stock 600. Almost 2 minutes into the equity market open, the Stock 600 is higher by 0.5%. In terms of how it's distributed across industry groups, you've got pretty much all of them in the green, apart from food and beverage, which is edging into the red. Commodity producers, construction and banks leading the gains. Regional equity benchmarks also moving higher. The FTSE 100 up 0.8%. The CAC 40 higher by 0.9%. Still waiting for the DAX to price properly, but we are seeing the FTSE MIB also in the green. We eked out just a small gain on the S&P 500 yesterday, a gain of 0.1%, and futures 0.1% higher on Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures there. Nasdaq futures leading slightly up almost 0.2%. We saw global bond yields tumble on the risk off yesterday, and we're steadying up today. The 10-year Treasury yield, by the way, this week has lost almost 10 basis points. Citigroup saying, look, we're breaking a trend line we've been in since September. We could get to a 150 handle. A 175 handle is where we are, up a basis point and a half. The 10-year bund yield up a basis point, negative 29. The 10-year gilt yield absolutely steady, just below 60 basis points. And of course, that could be in focus as we get PMI data for the UK later. We get it for the Eurozone as well, but the UK PMI data particularly in focus because of the pricing around a rate cut for the BOE in January. The pound, meanwhile, volatility has been rising, by the way, short-term volatility, 2-week volatility. If we take a look at cable, we're steady at 131.21. Could it be vulnerable if the data today confirms bets on a rate cut this month? Elsewhere in FX, the yen is heading for a weekly gain. Euro yen was very much in focus yesterday, kind of gives you a sense of risk. And of course, the euro fell after Christine Lagarde's news conference, but euro yen testing a 4-month trend line. And then finally, taking a look at oil, a little firmer on Brent and WTI. Brent 62.29, WTI 55.83, but oil heading for a third weekly loss, Roger.
Okay, let's have a look at what stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Lisa Pham has joined us in our London studio. Lisa, good morning. Now, the French cognac maker Rémy Cointreau is not, they're not celebrating, are they?
No. So the shares are down 8.2% at the moment. They've abandoned their forecast for this year, actually. Their revenue fell 11% in the last 3 months of 2019, which is actually more than almost double the decline that analysts had been expecting. So the protests in Hong Kong have been disrupting sales, essentially, and they've also had like a change in the CEO in the past few months. So another thing that's also weighing down on the stock is the outbreak of the new virus in China.
Yeah, that doesn't really help. But I mean, in general, it's been a bad time for luxury and travel stocks, perhaps with an eye to what's been going on in Hong Kong, but more widely.
Exactly. And also looking at the luxury stocks, I mean, with Chinese New Year, like that's really having an impact, essentially. The timing couldn't be any worse because it's a week-long holiday in China for the Lunar New Year. JP Morgan said earlier this week that the constraints on travel resulting from any outbreak would be a key risk to the luxury sector because they get about 35% of their sales from the Chinese consumer. So at the moment, I mean, we do have LVMH and Kering shares up today, but they're down about 5% this week.
Okay, and finally, Takeaway.com. Here in the UK, there are plans to review their $8 billion deal for Just Eat.
Yeah, so the revised expected timetable on the deal is Takeaway is saying it's probably going to delay it by about a week. We do have a Just Eat shareholder called Catrock who had been quite vocal last year. They think the CMA investigation into the deal is unwarranted and that there should be a quick and fair review. The deal has been quite a saga, like there was a months-long bidding war with process. So hopefully things will not be delayed too much. I mean, Citigroup says the deal isn't expected to be prevented by any CMA investigation, but it could slow down the process, essentially.
Right. Lisa, thanks. Lisa Pham there, or Bloomberg's Lisa Pham, looking at what the stocks are to watch this morning.
And another stock we're looking at, Roger, is Ericsson, which dropped as much as 9% at the open, right now down 7.7%. So actually dropping the most since July. And this is after it missed profit forecasts in the fourth quarter. Its US sales being hit by uncertainty over the proposed merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. To give the context, US phone companies have been reluctant to spend more heavily on a new generation of wireless networks until they know whether the combination of the country's third and fourth biggest carriers will be approved. And the deal's been held up by legal challenges since it was announced in 2018. It's now in the hands of a US district judge. So the statement said that the uncertainty led to a slowdown in the North American business in the fourth quarter. And the earnings miss from Ericsson interrupting a trend of improving results under the CEO Börje Ekholm, and it's a bit of a worrying sign for the industry's near-term prospects because the US is seen as an early mover in rolling out 5G mobile networks, which have been slow to take off in some other markets. So Ericsson's shares taking a little bit of a hit. Some of the other headlines we got, of course, is that it sees somewhat higher operating expenses in 2020, Roger.
Okay, well, let's have a look at our top stories. Now, China is rushing to halt the spread of the new coronavirus as the death toll rises to 25. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The World Health Organization stopped short of calling this a global health emergency. That seemed to reassure markets as Asia traded mostly sideways. China has implemented restrictions on travel and public gatherings in Wuhan and also in many surrounding areas. And Hong Kong, Macau, and Beijing have canceled holiday activities. Now, most cases remain mild, with only about 1/4 of them developing more severe disease. Most of those who died have had other health conditions. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Let's turn to the latest between the US and Huawei because new rules are coming to put even more limits on US companies supplying the Chinese telecoms company. Huawei was blacklisted last year as a security threat that prevented many companies from selling its components, but some found a workaround. Speaking to Bloomberg in Davos, US Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says the ultimate goal is not to cut Huawei off from supplies, but to protect national security.
Huawei has been out encouraging American companies to flaunt the U.S. laws, to flaunt the regulations that we have. That's a very dangerous practice, and it's not a very good practice, and longer term, not going to be good for them.
A decision on Huawei here in the UK is expected early next week.
Also in the UK, after a run of weak data relating to the final 3 months of 2019 and a series of dovish comments from the Bank of England policymakers, markets are firmly focused on today's flash PMI, which is out at 9:30. Dan Hansen, Bloomberg Economics UK economist, has the preview.
Surveys relating to the period since Prime Minister Boris Johnson's election victory have rebounded, and we expect the PMI to follow suit, moving up to 51.5 from 49.3 in December. If our forecast comes to pass, we think it's likely the BOE will hold off cutting rates at its January meeting, which will also be Governor Mark Carney's last. The central bank is likely to maintain its dovish bias until it's clear any turnaround in the surveys is translating to the hard data. In London, Dan Hansen, Bloomberg Economics.
And in corporate news, Bayer is discussing a roundup settlement of about $10 billion. That's over claims the weed killer causes cancer. We've learned the chemicals giant is setting aside $8 billion to resolve current cases and $2 billion for future claims. Bayer declining to comment on the terms under negotiation. A deal resolving the 85,000 cases may come within the month.
And the era of the all-white male board may be coming to an end. Goldman Sachs will no longer do business with companies if they lack a director who's either female or diverse. And next year, it'll raise the threshold. It won't work with a company if it doesn't have 2 directors who are white, male or straight. And by the way, Goldman Sachs has 4 women on its 11-member board.
And after another knockout year at JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon's been awarded $31.5 million in compensation. That includes $25 million of restricted stock on top of a base salary of $1.5 million. His bonus, $5 million in cash. Dimon has run the company since the end of 2005. 2019 saw record profit for the second year in a row.
OK, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. And now more on that top story mentioned earlier. Singapore's Prime Minister says the coronavirus outbreak requires countries to come together. We spoke to Lee Hsien Loong at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he told us that collaboration is crucial.
It is an example of why countries need to work together. You may wish to be deglobalized, but the virus is not going to be deglobalized.
Singapore has now confirmed the first case of the virus, which is spreading faster than Chinese authorities first expected. And in the last hour, 2 more cases of the virus have been detected in Singapore. Now let's cross over to Italy, where a regional election on Sunday threatens to destabilize the Rome government. Matteo Salvini of the League wants to win Emilia-Romagna, a leftist stronghold. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has all those details.
If Salvini succeeds, that would trigger turmoil inside Premier Giuseppe Conte's 2 main partners, the centre-left Democratic Party and the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. But the parties in power dread an early general election because of the League's popularity nationwide. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Let's stay in Europe. The French government is pushing ahead with its plans to reform the country's pension system. Draft legislation will be presented later today to Cabinet before it heads to Parliament for debate. Bloomberg's James Regan reports.
President Emmanuel Macron has weathered weeks of strikes and protests against the proposals that have especially hit transportation. Concessions have led some moderate unions to suspend their opposition, while hardliners have turned to more radical actions such as random power cuts and blockades. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And wildfires in Australia are set to push the rise in global CO2 levels to a record. Most recent estimates suggest the fires will release about 900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's about the same emitted by all commercial aircraft in 2018. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, here's a look at what's coming up today. As we were mentioning earlier, lots of European PMIs due out in the morning, with investors looking to the euro area composite reading at 9 a.m. UK time. Bloomberg Economics expects the January PMI to show underlying improvement in sentiment. Half an hour later, the UK composite PMI will be key for next week's BOE meeting. If the survey fails to post a meaningful bounce, a rate cut will become likely. The market's already pricing it better than even odds, but Bloomberg Economics expects the composite PMI to move up to 51.5 from 49.3 in December. Roger, we've got lots more from Davos coming up. We're also going to get an update on the coronavirus outbreak and how it's moving markets.
Indeed, there does seem to have been a sense that it is affecting all kinds of markets, perhaps, as you might think, not least the luxury markets. We were hearing some details on that earlier, but the main point is that at the moment the virus does seem to be at least not spreading that far outside China.
And stocks bouncing back.
Rich
is
just a really good guy that term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
GEP, AI-powered cloud-native digital transformation. Hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies work with GEP to transform their procurement and supply chain operations. Why? GEP's unified digital platforms, smart, intuitive software that business users love, drive up adoption, user satisfaction, and productivity. GEP helps CIOs drive real digital transformation and achieve amazing results. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me, I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs on Bloomberg Technology.
The tech IPO market has seen its fair share of highs and lows over the past year, drawing skepticism from companies considering going public. Our direct listings, the new IPO. Bloomberg's Shonali Bossack spoke to NASDAQ CEO Adina Friedman on the health of the public market. Take a listen.
I do think that the underpinning of the economy, certainly in the United States, continues to be very strong. And when you look at the opportunities that exist, the companies that are looking to tap the public markets, it feels like a very healthy environment right now.
So speaking of companies going public, we have so much fewer of them. What are the longer term ramifications of that?
So I think in terms of the last couple of years, we actually had 187 IPOs come to NASDAQ and a 78% win rate last year. So we were very pleased with that. And we had 186 the year before. But you are right that if you compare that, which felt very healthy, to even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, we used to have 300, 400 on a regular basis. So the number of companies are fewer in the public markets, and we do have concerns about making sure that every person has an opportunity to tap the growth potential of great companies that are coming out. So if companies are waiting longer to go public or they're choosing to stay private forever, it does choke off that opportunity to a majority of the population. So we do care deeply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. It's been a much quieter session for Asian equities today, with several markets closed for regional holidays. The Nikkei 225 closed higher by 0.1%, as did the Hang Seng. The Kospi and the Shanghai Composite were both closed today. Looking at U.S. index futures, the E-mini S&Ps and the E-mini NASDAQs are higher, with both now trading up by 0.2%. It's been a very buoyant open for European equities, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, the CAC Caron, and FTSE 100 all trading higher by about 1%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is higher by 2 basis points at 1.75%, while the 10-year German bond yield is also up 2 basis points at minus 0.29%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is steady, with most G10 pairs trading in relatively tight ranges. Looking at the European event risk calendar, there's plenty of PMI releases on the docket today. We've just had flash January PMIs from France, with the composite reading coming in lower than expected. We also get preliminary releases from Germany, the Euro area, and the UK. In terms of central bank speakers, several policymakers are scheduled to speak in Davos, including the Bank of England's Haskell, the ECB's Lagarde, Verroy, and Knott, in addition to the Bank of Japan's Kuroda. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. In Spain, at least 13 people have died as a violent storm has ravaged parts of the country. Authorities have said 4 people were still missing after Storm Gloria brought heavy rain and strong winds. The government is to hold an emergency meeting later today to coordinate a response. Turkish President Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to meet in East Istanbul later today. They're expected to debate the flare-up in violence in Syria's Idlib province, one which could unleash a new wave of refugees. Back in 2016, Turkey and the EU signed an agreement with Turkey taking responsibility for the migrant crisis. And George Soros says Facebook may be in cahoots with President Trump to get him re-elected. The billionaire says there is nothing to stop Facebook from spreading disinformation and the social network's global maximum profit without regard to harm it causes. Facebook completely rejected the accusations, saying they're just plain wrong. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now let's get back to our top story. And the World Health Organization believes the coronavirus spreading from Wuhan in China is a local issue. The WHO said it has not yet become a global health emergency of international concern, but it may yet become one. The decision comes as the death toll has risen to 25 and China has taken unprecedented steps to slow the outbreak, restricting travel even further on the eve of the Lunar New Year. For more, let's go live to Beijing, where Bloomberg's China correspondent Selena Wang is standing by. Selena, great to speak to you again. I said Happy New Year to you yesterday, Xin Yan Kuai, but you're working today. Just give us the latest. Run us through the numbers in terms of cases, the death toll, and just what's being done at the moment in China and elsewhere.
Well, Naira, sadly, it's been quite a dismal Xinyan with city of Wuhan at the start of the travel ban that's now been extended to 10 cities that are essentially in quarantine as the government is trying to curb the spread of this as we head into Lunar New Year. That means about 30 million people are under lockdown. This is a massive logistical challenge given that Wuhan is really a big travel hub in the center of China's high-speed rails. The death toll has now jumped to 25 and more than 800 infected. The researchers put that number in the thousands, and officials say that although most of those infected have had a mild response, about a quarter have actually developed serious disease, and this infection continues to spread in almost every one of China's provinces and across Asia, with new cases just reported in Singapore and even a case in the United States. And what's concerning here is that some of these patients aren't even showing signs of a fever, which is the main way that governments around the world right now are using to track if someone could be infected.
And I suppose the point in all this really is how effectively the government is tackling it, Selena. I mean, there is an issue to do with the public feeling that in many cases, even at local government or national government level, it's not quite as good as it should be.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been a number of criticism. At the national level, however, widely China has been praised for the strong response. You've heard from Xi Jinping as well as Premier Li Keqiang asking to resolutely curb this, to put in all-out effort to stop the spread. But it seems the government is allowing the criticism to flow to the local government, in particular the Hubei province has come under sharp criticism, even from local media. There's even been calls for Wuhan's mayor, which is the capital of Hubei, to resign for failing to curb the virus early on. And you're really seeing the panic and anger growing on the ground. There are local reports in Wuhan that hospitals are flooded and people with fevers can't see a doctor because of the overcapacity. And there are locals posting photos on social media of grocery stores with empty shelves and expensive food prices. So China is trying to avoid a repeat of SARS when you had some 100 officials sacked for trying to cover up the spread of this virus. And China has come a long way in terms of upgrading its infrastructure, spending some 12 billion yuan to help prevent the spread of these sort of viral diseases. But of course, there's still a lot of work to be done, even though the transparency and infrastructure is getting better.
Yeah, and Selena, you mentioned SARS. At the peak of that crisis, China's growth took a 2 percentage point hit, according to Bloomberg Economics, which has run the numbers on this. You've got S&P Global Ratings saying that if spending on things including discretionary transport and entertainment dropped by 10%, overall GDP growth would fall by about 1.2 percentage points. This is back of the envelope estimates. What other sort of calls are we getting out there on how this might actually impact China's economy?
Well, I think just looking at it from on the ground here, I mean, as we head into Lunar New Year, I mean, this is supposed to be the largest human migration in the world, where you have people racking up some 3 billion trips. But now you're seeing all of the consumption and festivities that were planned. A lot of them are grinding to a halt. The official festivities are banned in Beijing, Hong Kong, Macau. You have really a sense of fear and concern as you have these nationwide screenings everywhere, even in Beijing, which is hundreds of miles away from Wuhan. As you walk into stores, you have to get your temperature taken in some places. You're required to use hand sanitizer. Some cities are getting stripped of face masks and hand sanitizers, and some local film companies are delaying the release of blockbuster movies. Shanghai Disney is temporarily closing, and Guangdong is temporarily closing some movie theaters during the holidays, with multiple cases of coronavirus there. So, of course, this would point to serious risks to the local economy, especially given how important the consumption sector is.
Selena, thank you. Selena Wang there, live on the line from Beijing with the latest on the outbreak of the coronavirus and how the government's tackling it, and the concerns that many people seem to have that it's not working as well as it should.
And up next, we hear from ECB President Christine Lagarde from Davos. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. In an effort to settle tens of thousands of claims that Bayer's Roundup weed killer causes cancer, lawyers for some plaintiffs are in talks with the company. Sources tell Bloomberg the total payout could reach $10 billion. In some discussions, Bayer's lawyers have said the chemical maker will set aside $8 billion to resolve current cases and reserve $2 billion for future claims. iPhone and iPad chargers don't work with other devices, and Apple is fighting efforts in Europe to change that. The European Union is considering legislation that would standardize chargers for mobile devices. Apple says regulations that enforces conformity stifles innovation and will harm consumers. 8 former Wells Fargo executives face a record $59 million in fines stemming from recent scandals at the bank. Former CEO John Stumpf has agreed to pay a $17.5 million penalty and is banned from the banking industry. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Get to TradePoint for 20% off kitchen sinks, taps and appliances when you spend £2,500 or more on a kitchen. Plus, 10% trade loyalty discount will be applied instantly for all TradePoint members. So for a great deal on kitchens, get to TradePoint. In-store orders only, maximum 10 appliances, excludes clearance, ends 2nd of February. See tradepoint.co.uk.
Welcome aboard Europe's 169th safest airline.
You were like my 169th biggest crush in school.
Your total body age is 169.
The number 169 never screamed glamour until now. Get the Toyota Aygo X-Play for only £169 deposit, then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Aygo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Aygo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £3,311.25p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, fearing restrictive laws from the new Democratic majority in Virginia's capital, gun owners demonstrate and whisper about armed rebellion.
And they were using a different term, boogaloo, which is this semi-ironic online term for civil war, and talking about, like, does the boogaloo begin in Virginia?
Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Yeah.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahid.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And as you're listening, we do have German PMI data just hitting the tape right now. Taking a look at the services PMI, that comes in better than expected, 54.2. The estimate was 53. The manufacturing PMI, also better than expected, 45.2. Estimate was 44.5. But of course, crucially, the manufacturing sector still in contractionary territory, and the composite 51.1, again beating the survey of 50.5. And all of those readings, a manufacturing services composite, better than the previous reading. So perhaps supporting any views out there that we're seeing a bottoming in the German economy. That's one of the questions out there, of course. If we take a look at the markets, 31 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, what's been dominating the markets all week really has been the threat of the spread of the coronavirus. We've seen 4 days of declines for European equities, global stocks heading for a weekly loss, but we bounced back quite strongly today, recouping the losses from yesterday and then some, up 0.9% on the Stock 600. If we take a look at regional equity benchmarks, up more than 1% now on the FTSE 100, on the CAC 40 and the DAX. The IBEX edging towards a 1% gain, FTSE MIB up more than 1% as well. We saw losses in European equities yesterday. US stocks actually posted a very muted gain, the S&P 500 gaining 0.1%. It looks like we could build on those gains today, judging by futures. Dow, S&P, NASDAQ futures all up by at least 0.2%. With Asian equity markets, can't really take many cues from them today because a lot of them, of course, are closed for Lunar New Year, including China and Hong Kong. Taking cues from the bond market, yesterday we saw a yield slide globally, really again on these concerns around coronavirus, and yields bouncing back a little bit today. The 10-year Treasury yield up 2 basis points, 175 handle, getting close to 176. Citigroup says we could touch 150 because of breaking a trend line that we've been in since September. The 10-year Bund yield up 2 basis points, negative 29. 10-year gilt yield edges up a basis point to 60 basis points. I've just broken German PMI data, but of course for the gilt yield and for the pound, there's going to be crucial PMI data out of the UK today. day, and 1 week implied volatility on the pound has been rising ahead of that. 131.33 is where we trade on cable. How is the data today going to affect the market pricing for a BOE rate cut in January? It's better than even odds at the moment. And finally, taking a check on oil, steadying, firming up. WTI 55.74, Brent crude 62.18, but oil heading for a third weekly loss. Roger.
Okay, well, let's have a look at our top stories. And China is rushing to halt the spread of the new coronavirus as the death toll rises to 25. That's as the World Health Organization stopped short of declaring the new coronavirus outbreak a global health emergency.
Now is not the time. That's a bit too early to consider that this event is a public health emergency of international concern.
That was the organisation's Director General at a press conference yesterday. Public health experts at the WHO will reconvene in 10 days or sooner if the situation worsens. 10 Chinese cities now have restrictions on travel.
In top corporate news, Bayer is discussing a roundup settlement of about $10 billion. That's over claims the weed killer causes cancer. We've learned the chemicals giant is setting aside $8 billion to resolve current cases and $2 billion for future claims. Bayer declining to comment on the terms under negotiation. A deal resolving the 85,000 cases may come within the month.
Intel's giving bullish quarterly and full-year revenue forecasts. That's driven by a surge in demand for chips that power large cloud centres. Sales in 2020 will be well above expectations. Intel will also be spending $17 billion on new plants and equipment, not only to fill customer orders, but to increase manufacturing capacity.
And the era of the all-white male board may be coming to an end. Goldman Sachs will no longer do business with companies if they lack a director who's either female or diverse. And next year, it'll raise the threshold. It won't work with a company if it doesn't have 2 directors who aren't white, male or straight. By the way, Goldman Sachs has 4 women on its 11-member board.
Now, continuing coverage from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
And we're back in Davos for the final day of the World Economic Forum's annual gathering. Early this morning, the European Central Bank President, Christine Lagarde, joined Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua a day after announcing a review of the ECB's inflation goal and policy tools. Francine began by asking what signs should markets be looking at in the review to give them a sense of what's next.
If markets are interested in what happens in the next 12 months, they should not pay too much attention to the strategy review, because we're conducting 2 separate exercises here. We will have our monetary policy assessment and review as usual. Every 6 weeks, we all get together, we look at the numbers, we look at the markets, we look at the views of the citizens in terms of inflation expectations, and we decide whether things should be statu quo, whether they should vary one way or the other. And that exercise will be conducted irrespective of the strategy review. So to those who say, oh, it's going to be completely static and stable for 12 months, I'd say, watch out, because things change. And we might have different signals and we might reconsider. We might. I don't know at this point in time. What I know for sure is that it will be 2 different exercises. And the strategy review will be on its own, on a standalone basis, and will progress because we are looking at what we do in the future, not what we do next week or in May or in July.
So is it almost a warning to the markets not to overinterpret too quickly?
They always overinterpret. You know, they're going to look at my face and see, well, is she smiling? Is she dovish? Is she hawkish? I told them on day one, I said, don't overinterpret. We will say what we can say. And I know that some people are disappointed that we haven't said much more yesterday. But a strategy review starts here, finishes there, and you cannot here say what you're going to do there. Otherwise, you don't do a strategy review. And we need to do a lot of stock taking, looking at the effectiveness of what we've done, learn from other countries around the world as well in the process. You know that the Fed is undergoing the same exercise. And we need to take time to reach out to the Parliament, to academics, to people, to those who are interested in these issues, to hear the voices, to understand what their views are. We will listen to markets as well, but they are one of the voices that we will listen to.
Economists believe that monetary policy at the ECB will be largely on autopilot for the next 2 years. Is that a mistake?
No, I just told you. To those who think that it's autopilot, I think that's ridiculous. There is a forward guidance which is strong, which is setting, a very clear timetable that is fact dependent. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact-driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be, and I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Yesterday you talked quite extensively about negative rates. You said tiering is working well, but is there a point where actually the side effects of negative rates means that you need to scale it back?
We will be looking at the side effects as part of the strategy review. There's no question about that. We need to be attentive to that. Financial stability is not our first driver of concern and consideration, but we will have to look at it, of course. Yeah. And don't forget that we need to have a banking sector in the euro area that acts as a good channel of transmission.
And that was the ECB President Christine Lagarde speaking to Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix at Davos.
For the latest in global news now, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Singapore's Prime Minister says a one-country, two-systems principle that governs Hong Kong may not last. Speaking to Bloomberg at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he said the government needs to tackle protester concerns over the lack of affordable housing. That said, he didn't see violent protests resolving those problems.
Well, I can well understand why the protesters are upset, but I can't see how this path is going to lead to improvements in all these difficult problems.
In Italy, a regional election on Sunday threatens to destabilise the Rome government. Matteo Salvini of the League wants to win Emilia-Romagna, a leftist stronghold. If Salvini succeeds, that would trigger turmoil inside Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's two main parties, the centre-left Democratic Party and the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. But the parties in power dread an early general election because of the League's popularity nationwide. Turkish President Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to meet in Istanbul later today. As Bloomberg's Simon Demakan explains, Syria will be among the main talking points.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to debate the flare-up in violence in Syria's Idlib province, one which could unleash a new wave of refugees. Back in 2016, Turkey and the EU signed an agreement, with Turkey taking responsibility for the migrant crisis. In return, Ankara had a few requirements of its own, and Erdogan is expected to highlight his disappointment to Merkel over the EU's failure to deliver. In Istanbul, Simon Demakan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And wildfires in Australia are set to push the rise in global CO2 levels to a record. Most recent estimates suggest the fires will release about 900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's about the same emitted by all commercial aircraft in 2018. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks so much indeed, Leanne. And coming up, we'll be talking to David Zahn of Franklin Templeton. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and, of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action. Look how he makes eye contact with his person. That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive, and now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
The happy dance will come in with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA.
Come here, sister. Papa's in the swing.
I'm your daughter. What you cooking?
Albert Badler potatoes. I'm doing the jerk.
Very appropriate.
I'm doing the fly.
Doing the monkey?
The mashed potatoes.
Jump back, Jack. I'll handle that.
See you later, alligator.
Hey, back here and get the roast on.
Grab a brand new recyclable bag today and do the Albert Bartlett.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
You're 169 in the queue.
I proposed on the 169. She got offered the next stop.
You're my 169th greatest lover.
The number 169 never screamed going places until now. Get the Toyota Aygo X-Play for only £169 deposit, then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Aygo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Aygo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £3,311.25p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren-Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Along the goal line, scores! He takes it home! Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European equities are in the green as investor concerns over the coronavirus have eased a bit after the World Health Organization stopped short of calling the virus a global health emergency. The Stock 600 currently up 1 0.2%, and the FTSE gaining 1.5% here in London, while the DAX and CAC 40 are both higher by 1 3/10%. US equity futures very much in the green as well. In stocks to watch, I'm keeping an eye on Bayer, the German chemicals giant, gaining almost 4% in Frankfurt after sources say it's considering a $10 billion settlement over its Roundup weed killer. On the other hand, Rémy Cointreau falling 9% in Paris after it ditched its guidance following a drop in sales in Hong Kong. The move away from safety is sending the yen slightly lower, down 0.1% against the greenback at 109.6. The dollar is unchanged. The sterling holding at 131 and the euro at 110. This after ECB chief Christine Lagarde told Bloomberg that monetary policy is not on autopilot as the ECB continues to review its strategy. I'm also keeping a close eye on Bitcoin today, sliding 0.9% to $8,311 amid a warning of slowing demand for cryptos during the Chinese lunar holiday. In fixed income, the 10-year Treasury yield is up more than 2 basis points to 1.75%. 10-year bund yields gaining 2 basis points to negative 29. 10-year gilt yields ticking higher to 60 basis points. Finally, oil is gaining despite being on track for its longest losing streak since May. WTI up 0.5% at $55 a barrel. Brent gaining 0.4% at $62 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. President Trump says he will release his promised Middle East peace plan before Israeli leaders visit Washington next week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his rival Benny Gantz will go to the White House with Israel gripped by political deadlock. Major issues include the occupied West Bank, whether Palestinians would have the right of return, and whether East Jerusalem could serve as a Palestinian capital. In Spain, at least 13 people have died as a violent storm has ravaged parts of the country. Authorities have said 4 people were still missing after Storm Gloria brought heavy rain and strong winds. The government is to hold an emergency meeting later today to coordinate a response. And finally, the doomsday clock is closer to midnight than ever before. Atomic scientists cited the rising nuclear threat and a lack of action on climate change. They moved the clock 100 seconds to midnight, a 20-second advance. The clock has been maintained since 1947 when it was at 7 minutes to midnight. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Leanne, so it's all getting a lot more dangerous.
But I just want to say this doomsday clock is not a real clock. It's a symbolic clock. So we all just now can have a little bit of a sigh of relief there. But yes, it is moving ever closer, and that's because of the threat of nuclear war. As we've seen lots of things happening this year, Iran nuclear deal, and also climate change. The world is just getting hotter, which we cannot stay away from.
Oh, well, never mind. Don't look at the clock is the answer. Which, of course, in here we do have to look at the clock, and it's time to talk to our guest.
It absolutely is, and I'm glad that we've sort of ended on climate change because it does make for an easy transition in terms of talking about Christine Lagarde at the ECB and the interview that she did with Bloomberg earlier, talking about how important it is for central banks to play a role in mitigating the climate change risk. She did say that central bankers won't eliminate climate change alone, though, and that the climate impact on stability is largely underestimated. And of course, climate has been the big topic of discussion all week in Davos. And to talk about that and other big topics with us for the rest of the hour, we've got David Zahn with us in the studio, head of European fixed income at Franklin Templeton. Great to see you, David. Hope you've had a good week. Let's kick off then on Christine Lagarde and the ECB making very clear that the strategic policy review and monetary policy are happening on 2 separate tracks. Her message to investors: don't assume ECB policy is on autopilot. If you don't assume that, how do you trade European bonds?
Well, I think we have to look at, the ECB is going to be looking at the fundamentals of the economy. They're going to see that inflation is quite low and is expected to remain very low. We've seen, forecasters are actually bringing down their forecasts for what inflation will be across Europe. Growth is also low in Europe. It's growing around 1%, but that's around trend, so that's not a problem. But there's really not very much that you can see that's going to make the ECB move away from being very accommodative. And so I think what she was trying to say is people should shouldn't just assume that rates are going to stay here forever, but we believe that, rates are not going to go up in Europe for at least several years. QE will continue. And I think this whole review is very constructive that she's doing to look at what is the governance, how does the ECB work, and because that should be done by any organization on a regular basis.
And she's putting even more pressure, of course, on the national governments to come in on the fiscal side. I mean, she was pushing that line quite strongly in the interview. I mean, she said they would work alongside each other. It's not an either or. But is she going to get any pushback, any feedback on that even?
Well, we have to remember that Draghi also pushed a lot for fiscal expansion within Europe, and that didn't really go very far. Lagarde is a politician, so I think she might have a better chance of getting that. But there's only a couple of countries that really have scope to actually increase spending, namely Germany and the Netherlands can do that. And they just don't seem to want to do that. So I don't think there is going to be this huge fiscal impulse through Europe that a lot of people are hoping for or expecting.
Yeah. So if you think that rates are going to stay low for the next few years and you don't necessarily expect a big fiscal push, what do you then do in your European fixed income strategy, particularly with so much debt that's negative yielding right now? Is it spread plays? Is it curve plays?
Well, I think it is a bit of spread play. I think you need one of the two markets we like Spain. We think Spain still has good fundamentals and you get paid to own it, reasonable to the core. In addition, Italy is another one. There will be volatility with the political uncertainty in Italy, especially this weekend. But, fundamentally, we think Italy, is doing fine. And so therefore, we would see any volatility as an opportunity to add. And also, we're looking outside the Eurozone. So we have, positions in places like Norway, where they have been hiking rates, but now they're probably stopping. Also in Czech Republic and in Hungary. So you have to kind of look across broader Europe rather than just the Eurozone and just the core.
And Greece within the Eurozone, Greece has had such a ride. Now, there do seem to be good signs there.
Well, I think Greece is doing okay, but it still has way too much debt. And so we would, given the yields on Greece are very similar to the yields on Italy, we would probably continue to say Italy is the better trade, and it's much more liquid.
What about the UK? We're looking ahead to PMI data from the UK today as well. 60% probability or thereabouts, or at least better than even odds of a rate cut coming from the Bank of England in January. Are you buying gilts?
No, actually, we're short gilts, and actually we think that you should be looking at fading any rally. We're looking at this two-way in our dedicated UK funds. We're short gilts, and also in our European funds, we've gone short gilts versus Europe. And that's really because we think that the fiscal easing that can happen in the UK will be significantly large in the March budget, especially relative to what Europe can do. And we also think that the market's getting a bit too excited that the MPC is going to cut rates, they're going to open QE, they're going to do this, that. And it's, well, yes, the economy is slowing a little bit, but the jobs report we had was very good. And we have a big change coming from the government as far as their spending plans. And so I think if I was out on the MPC, I'd want to, let's just wait and see a little bit of what's going to happen before we just start moving along. And then lastly, we do have a new governor coming in. And so you don't want to kind of set policy completely before Bailey arrives.
And you've got an awful lot of uncertainty going forward. What is going to happen with the negotiations with Europe, all the various things that hang on that, and would make the public spending more or less realistic, I guess, also. Not to mention signs this week that perhaps the relationship with the US, the possibility of a trade deal, rather less than perhaps might have been thought before.
Well, with all this, politics, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt of what you see happening on the surface compared to what's happening behind the scenes. But I do think that there is a lot of unknowns to the UK economy, which is one of the other reasons I think they'll do more spending, because they want to keep the economy moving. They want to basically reward the areas that got them elected, and I think they will do that quite convincingly.
Yeah. As we look ahead to 2020, and we're already in it, of course, David, what are the sort of top questions that you're getting from investors about European bonds, particularly when last year bond markets did well globally, but a lot of people would still say, look, we prefer treasuries just because of the yield on offer?
Well, I think the biggest question we're getting is where can I go for yield and where can I go for stability?
And your answer?
is I still think European bonds is the place to be. It will be stable. It will be very supported by a central bank. You're not going to have a big fiscal ease coming. In the U.S., the big problem you have is the election coming up. And depending on what happens with the Democratic candidate, this could actually, I think, bring volatility to market, which will hit Europe if it hits the U.S., but I think it will hit it in a much lighter way.
Do you see the Fed actually moving then?
No, the Fed's not going to do anything.
Okay.
What about corporate spreads? Room for more tightening in Europe?
I think corporate spreads, it's difficult to talk about corporates as a general area because you have the ones that are ECB eligible, which I think will hold in quite nicely. Then you have the other more global issuers that will probably be a little bit more volatile, but we don't see a huge amount of value in corporates at the moment. So in our aggregate accounts, we've been moving out of corporates into things like Spain, Italy, where you can get better yields, better liquidity.
All right, David, thank you very much indeed. David Zarner, head of European Fixed Income at Franklin Templeton, join us in our London studio. We are getting some lines coming through now about future trade disputes. EU, China, 15 others are going to form an alliance to settle trade disputes. The EU-China group will replicate the WTO's defunct appellate body. Of course, WTO's appellate body defunct because the United States decided not to back any further members of it. So a move to try and see if they can work around that.
And we end the week in the green on the Stock 600, up 1.2%, almost an hour into the equity market open. This is Bloomberg.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You are listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Let's get to some breaking news, shall we, this hour, Matt? We've got European PMIs breaking throughout the morning, and we get the euro area combined number right now. So the manufacturing PMIs come in better than the forecast, so 47.8 against a forecast of 46.8. Better than the forecast, but still below 50, so still in contraction territory, underlining the concerns around a manufacturing recession, even if we are seeing some data bouncing off the bottom. On the services side of things, has there been infection from the slowdown in manufacturing? Well, maybe we're seeing some of that. It is still above 50. It's 52.2, but it is below the forecast of 52.8. So even if we're seeing a manufacturing bottom out, are we starting to see some infection into the services industry? That's no doubt part of the conversation that will continue from here. We check the markets every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio. So let's get to what we're seeing on stocks right now. Really interesting to see the extent of the rebound we've got on European markets today. So the Stock 600 up by 1.2%, the FTSE 100 up by 1.4%, the CAC up 1.4 as well, and the Xetra up by 1.3. The gains are really broad-based. And at first it seemed as if we were playing catch-up with the US session because they made strong gains yesterday whilst we were busy selling off, or after we'd been busy selling off. But now US futures are also pointing higher, and we do see some earnings news that perhaps is pleasing. So Nasdaq futures up 0.4%. We've got Intel numbers that triggered an 8% rally in the share price in after-hours trading. trade. So there's that dimension to add. And perhaps European investors just taking a slightly different view of the corona market. Lockdown for 40 million people and death. Of course, 25 is now the death toll over in China. But perhaps from the market's perspective, they're starting to get a little bit more context around what we're seeing here coming out of China, the rate of spread, for example. On oil prices, we are a little bit firmer this morning, 62.18 on the Brent price. The yield on the US 10-year, 1.75%, and the dollar is fairly flat. 110 is still the handle on euro dollar after the ECB conference of yesterday, and also seeing the comments by Christine Lagarde saying don't take anything for granted in terms of ECB policy being uneventful or on hold for the next couple of years as they do these reviews. Matt.
All right, so investor concerns over the coronavirus seem to have subsided. The World Health Organization classified it as a local issue and not a global epidemic. That said, China has taken unprecedented steps to slow the outbreak, restricting travel for 30 million people over the Lunar New Year. For more, let's bring in Mark Dowding. He is Chief Investment Officer at Blue Bay Asset Management. And Mark, it does seem like something that would be painful to an economy, certainly in the U.S., if you stopped people from traveling and really reduced spending from 30 million consumers. It would be a huge problem. But of course, China's a much bigger economy. What do you think?
Well, for sure, and good morning. So I think that in trying to assess the impact of something like this, it's clearly you're dealing with the unknowns. You're trying to understand the nature of the left tail risk that could be associated with something which is very difficult to quantify at this particular time. Obviously, investors will be looking at SARS as a template back in 2003 to understand how markets may react and how economies may react in a situation like this. But there's a bit of a sense of uncertainty because at the moment, until we get some sense that there's some containment to the situation, it's hard to really form too many conclusions with too much certainty.
Yes, and indeed, and now we have the Lunar New Year upon us, and so there'll be muted trading, won't there, in Asia, and so we might not get a clear picture of the market's verdict on this for a little while. Of course, we watch the death toll tragically rise, albeit fairly slowly. Let me ask you about the European growth picture, Mark, because we've been getting a building picture of that this morning. The German services PMI rose to 54.2, the composite PMI rose to 51.1. Do you sense that we are moving through the worst of the European growth slump? That seemed to be what Christine Lagarde was pointing to. She has said that downside risks are less pronounced now.
Well, there certainly seems to be a sense of that, and we are seeing sort of PMIs bounce off their low, and I'd sort of attribute much of the price action in markets this morning to some better PMI numbers. Obviously, sort of earlier in the end of last year, we were still dealing with the fallout from the China-US trade dispute. The fact that has kind of been fixed, that worry has kind of gone away, does portend to the fact that things may look a little bit better as we go into 2020, and so notwithstanding what's sort of breaking in terms of the Wuhan virus, I think there would be some grounds for some tentative optimism coming into 2020 based on what we're currently seeing. That said, I think the big PMI number this morning will probably be the one from the UK, given the fact that there's a real split of opinion in terms of a possible rate cut from the Bank of England at the end of the month.
How do you view the UK economy, and what do you expect from the BOE?
Well, I mean, there's a number coming out in about 20 minutes. We've been looking for a decent bounce. We obviously saw a big gain in the CBI optimism numbers earlier in the week, and we had thought that something of a Boris bounce following last month's election, and also a pretty strong pivot towards more expansionary fiscal policy should really mean that the Bank of England stands pat and doesn't do any more to cut rates. I mean, we're of the opinion that when you're cutting rates when rates are already so low, it doesn't really do very much to help the economy, and we're actually in an era where what's really needed to counter any weakness in growth has got to be much more in the fiscal channel than it is in the monetary channel. So we're still in the camp that we think that the Bank of England shouldn't be cutting rates, but I think in order for that to be the case, we'll probably need to see a PMI number probably well above 53, 54, 55 perhaps at the release at 9:30. 1:30.
Right, so that's going to be important. So we'll be watching out for that in 24 minutes' time. Mark, so what does that do to the pound? What are your expectations for the pound? I'm sure we talked to one of your colleagues, David Riley, about the pound many, many times. What are your thoughts on where we head from here? Cable currently at 131.37.
Well, I think that clearly, if we do see confirmation of some somewhat better economic data, then you could see the pound rally a little bit further. I'm not sure that there is a sense in which we would be projecting the pound going from 131 racing towards 140 or anything like that. But I think there is maybe scope for the pound to push back towards its recent highs in the wake of the election if we do get the better data that we're looking for in the shorter term.
By the way, I'm looking at this developing story that you may not have seen, just crossed the Bloomberg terminal about 10 minutes ago. The EU and China and 15 other countries, excluding the United States, are forming an alliance to settle trade disputes. They're going to put together basically an appellate panel, the likes of which has been rendered toothless by President Trump. What do you think about these headlines here? Because it seems to me it could be a tectonic shift, Mark, if we have every other country besides the U.S. getting together to make a trade pact.
Well, I have to say that, I mean, all of the meetings I have with policymakers and in D.C. Tend to really suggest that actually the underlying sentiment in the U.S. is towards viewing China more as a strategic adversary on a forward-looking view rather than a trading partner. I do think that the direction of travel over time is more likely to be more bipolar trading blocks in the global economy and some disentanglement of supply chains over time. And I'd actually say that, relatively speaking, someone like Trump is actually a lot more dovish on China, certainly in comparison to a lot of the Democrats that we actually meet with. So I do think that you're going from a period of globalization and a single trading entity into something which is going to be looking rather different, I think, in the years ahead. So I think that's what you're really seeing in terms of a tectonic shift. And in the context of that, it doesn't really come as a big surprise to me that you would end up with new bodies, new alliances, new entities being established.
We spoke to Mark. Thank you very much. We spoke to one German politician this morning in Davos who was saying that Pax Americana doesn't work anymore, and here we see an example of the US being cut out of a global process, or albeit one that they don't really believe in anyway. But Mark Dowding, thank you very much, Chief Investment Officer at Blue Bay Asset Management.
Let's get your global news headlines now. For that, we go to Leanne Gerrans. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. More on that top story mentioned earlier. China is rushing to halt the spread of the new coronavirus as the death toll rises to 26. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The World Health Organization stopped short of calling this a global health emergency. That seemed to reassure markets as Asia traded mostly sideways. China has implemented restrictions on travel and public gatherings in Wuhan and also in many surrounding areas. And Hong Kong, Macau, and Beijing have canceled holiday activities. Now, most cases remain mild, with only about 1/4 of them developing more severe disease. Most of those who died have had other health conditions. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now let's cross over to Italy, where a regional election on Sunday threatens to destabilise the Rome government. Matteo Salvini of the League wants to win a key leftist stronghold. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has all those details.
If Salvini succeeds, that would trigger turmoil inside Premier Giuseppe Conte's two main partners, the centre-left Democratic Party and the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. But the parties in power dread an early general election because of the League's popularity nationwide. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Let's stay in Europe. The French government is pushing ahead with its plans to reform the country's pension system. Draft legislation will be presented later today at a cabinet meeting before it heads to Parliament for debate. Bloomberg's James Regan reports.
President Emmanuel Macron has weathered weeks of strikes and protests against the proposals that have especially hit transportation. Concessions have led some moderate unions to suspend their opposition, while hardliners have turned to more radical actions such as random power cuts and blockades. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And wildfires in Australia are set to push the rise in global CO2 levels to a record. Most recent estimates suggest the fires will release about 900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's about the same emitted by all commercial aircraft in 2018. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Leaders Liverpool remain on course to go the Premier League season unbeaten. It's now 23 top-flight matches without defeat in this campaign, following last night's 2-1 win at Wolves. Jurgen Klopp's side have a 16-point advantage at the top of the table, with a game in hand on second-place Manchester City. Wolves remain 7th, 6 points adrift of the Champions League spots. England's cricketers start their bid to seal victory in their Test series with South Africa this morning. They begin the fourth and final match, leading 2-1, so only need a draw in Johannesburg. Jofra Archer is expected to return from injury and could feature alongside fellow fast bowler Mark Wood. Captain Joe Root's delighted to have such selection issues.
Very fortunate now to see someone like Jimmy Anderson have to go home through injury, and we've still got a massive headache going into this game. Similarly, another few lads at home injured. It's a really good place to be.
And Northampton will look to move to the top of Rugby Union's Premiership by beating London Irish later. The Saints without a number of key players, though, because of international call-ups ahead of the Six Nations.
All right, so there's your sports report. When we come back here on Bloomberg Radio, we're going to talk with an opinion columnist. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
You knew the risks when you decided to drive drunk. There could be a crash. People could get hurt or killed. But that didn't stop you, did it? You knew you could get arrested. You could incur huge legal expenses, and you could possibly even lose your job. You were well aware of the consequences of driving drunk. But one thing's for sure. You were wrong when you said it was no big deal. Drive sober or get pulled over. This message brought to you by NHTSA.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs on Bloomberg Technology.
The tech IPO market has seen its fair share of highs and lows over the past year, drawing skepticism from companies considering going public. Are direct listings the new IPO? Bloomberg's Shonali Bostic spoke to NASDAQ CEO Adena Friedman on the health of the public market. Take a listen.
I do think that the underpinning of the economy, certainly in the United States, continues to be very strong. And when you look at the opportunities that exist, the companies that are looking to tap the public markets, it feels like a very healthy environment right now.
So speaking of companies going public, we have so much fewer of them. What are the longer-term ramifications of that?
So I think in terms of the last couple of years, we actually had 187 IPOs come to NASDAQ and a 78% win rate last year. So we were very pleased with that. And we had 186 the year before. But you are right that if you compare that, which felt very healthy, to even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, we used to have 300, 400 on a regular basis. So the number of companies are fewer in the public markets, and we do have concerns about making sure that every person has an opportunity to tap the growth potential of great companies that are coming out. So if companies are waiting longer to go public or they're choosing to stay private forever, it does choke off that opportunity to a majority of the population. So we do care deeply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Danny Berger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now we're watching Europe play catch-up with the U.S. after the U.S. closed higher yesterday while Europe struggled. So now we're seeing the Stock 600 index up by 1.2%. That's more than U.S. futures were up, which are up just 0.3%. And some of the stocks that had been really hurt as of late from the virus concerns as it spreads throughout China, Singapore, and beyond are actually bouncing back today. Maybe investors thinking that they're a bit oversold. So some of the luxury good names like LVMH coming back 2.3%, though they have fallen 4% since the outbreak was first reported. Now we're also looking at oil moving somewhat steadily after sliding for 3 days. WTI up by 0.2%. We're seeing something similar for Brent as well. The yen is also headed for its first weekly advance in 3 today. It's up by 0.1% versus the dollar. Remember, Asia markets shut for the Lunar New Year, though Hong Kong closed early, so we didn't get any signal from Asian markets today. However, with the yen heading higher, the other only currency to gain against the dollar in G10 this week is the pound, which has gained almost 1% so far this week. We also are looking at yields moving higher and the euro holding on to its Thursday decline down 5 basis points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Danny, good morning. In Spain, at least 13 people have died as a violent storm has ravaged parts of the country. Authorities have said 4 people were still missing after Storm Gloria brought heavy rain and strong winds. The government is to hold an emergency meeting later today to coordinate a response. Turkish President Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to meet in Istanbul later today. They're expected to debate the flare-up in violence in Syria's Idlib province, one which could unleash a new wave of refugees. Back in 2016, Turkey and the EU signed an agreement, with Turkey taking responsibility for the migrant crisis. And finally, George Soros says Facebook may be in cahoots with President Trump to get him re-elected. The billionaire says there is nothing to stop Facebook from spreading disinformation, and the social network's goal is maximum profit without regard to the harm it does actually cause. Facebook completely rejected the accusations, saying they're just plain wrong. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Elisa Martinuzzi, who covers all things finance for us here at Bloomberg. Elisa, good morning to you. And we wanted to talk to you about David Solomon's ultimatum from Davos. He says that Goldman will refuse IPOs unless the company's board has at least one person who is not white, male, or straight. So a really interesting take on diversity and what banks are prepared to do to push goals on that front. This isn't the first time we've heard from a bank, though, around this, or at least a big player in finance. Others in finance have been pushing similar agendas.
Yes, I think, though, it's easy to be a little bit cynical, as you say, but to be fair, this is a hard and fast, this is a hard target they've set. It isn't, a measure that they've set that they can be judged against later on. And I think more significantly, the bar at one diverse candidate is probably not very high. I think he's also pledged to move that to two candidates, two board members by 2021. And that's where I think you start really seeing a bit of a difference. Having said all that, it's, probably not very much cost to Goldman. These are going to be conversations they're going to be having with those clients anyway in the run-up to their IPOs.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to be too cynical. I suppose I was just pointing to others in the sector like BlackRock and State Street who've also been voting against directors at companies that don't have a female director. So I guess they're moving with that particular trend is the point I was making. Matt?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking of the big money that comes to Goldman. I guess they would be still able to run an Aramco IPO, although you could argue that board is not diverse at all.
Yes, no, quite. But by giving themselves, a 6 month and a 1 year target, they're going to be having those conversations with those companies, which gives them an opportunity to help shape those boards, which they should be doing anyway. But it does also potentially start a bit of a horse race. You could see, competitors pledging for even greater diversity. So yeah, I think it's every little bit helps clearly, and particularly if you look at some of the companies that are more prevalent in the IPO markets, the ones that tend to go public, are more often from the technology sector, where the record for diversity isn't a particularly good one.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look at IPOs, because I was thinking, who is this aimed at? Where is this aimed at? And where are the new IPOs coming from? And I thought instantly of the tech sector and Silicon Valley and all of the criticism about too much of the bro culture and all of that. And you look at something like WeWork, which I was reminded by our story this morning, only added a female director after the IPO prospectus was criticised on that front. So clearly there's work to do, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's clearly an issue. The initial bar isn't particularly high. I think we'd really have to hold them to their second target, which is two diverse candidates on board. I think that really starts to make a difference. And of course, when a company goes public, that's a very important phase in their development, in their history. It's an important time to have a diverse membership among the leaders.
How has Goldman Sachs done itself? I mean, they have women on their board for sure. What about in terms of their staff, in terms of the pay gap?
I don't have all those figures to hand. I mean, clearly it's Wall Street, and Wall Street isn't known for being particularly diverse. Bear in mind, a large US bank has yet to be run by a woman. That could well change. You have plenty of successes in waiting at some of the bigger banks. So certainly there seems to be a much more tangible shift than, say, a year ago.
Interesting, very interesting story. Thanks very much, Elisa Martinuzzi, opinion columnist here at Bloomberg. And I should say that David Solomon, whilst announcing this process, said that it was going to start on July the 1st in the US and Europe. So that is where they are focused with this particular initiative. A red headline across the Bloomberg tells us, Matt, that China is ordering travel agencies to suspend sales of package tours. Maybe people were still looking to buy those last-minute tours around the Lunar New Year holiday. Well, now it seems they won't be able to. How restrictive will that be for Chinese tourism and travel? This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Formula One is close to concluding negotiations with teams over a new charter, a crucial piece of Liberty Media's overhaul plans for the sport. According to Chief Executive Officer Chase Carey during an interview at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, we're in the final stages of it. Billionaire John Malone's Liberty Media wants to make the sport more competitive and attract a larger audience. It has proposed race teams share revenues more evenly to keep challengers from going bankrupt. It also calls for spending limits so races are more about drivers' skills than testing who can afford the best engineering. Major League Baseball will test automated umpires during spring training. However, MLB will not use it for calling strikes and balls in exhibition games. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr. Brought to you by Grainger, America's trusted source for industrial and safety supplies. Visit Grainger.com.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit BurdenLLP.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sail. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
On this week's On the Media, fearing restrictive laws from the new Democratic majority in Virginia's capital, gun owners demonstrate and whisper about armed rebellion.
And they were using a different term, boogaloo, which is this semi-ironic online term for civil war, and talking about, like, does the boogaloo begin in Virginia?
Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
One to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good Friday morning from Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. 9:30 London time means we get some PMI data, and it is sending the pound higher. UK January manufacturing PMI beats forecast by 1 percentage point. One whole number, I suppose you would call that. 49.8 is the number, and that was against a forecast of 48.8. The services PMI rises to 52.9. The forecast was for 51.1. So on both measures, we see that the number has beaten estimates. The pound had been rising into this number, so that's perhaps diminishing the amount of the gains that we're seeing now on sterling, but we are a little bit stronger on sterling, up by 0.25% at 131.56 against the US dollar. And of course, the big question here, Matt, is what this does to the assessment by the Bank of England on the 30th of January, towards the end of this month, next week, Thursday, of course, just before the Brexit process comes to its climax. The Bank of England has been suggesting of late that perhaps they could take some action, and certainly they've been giving dovish signals, I suppose is the wording I'm looking for. And so the market has been really closely focusing on all of the data coming out of the UK, and it had looked fairly gloomy. This number is giving markets something to think about, though, because now I see the pound is slumping back down a little bit, and is now 131.26.
Slumping down, but from fairly high levels, right? I mean...
only back down to where it started the day, but just sort of unwinding the initial spike higher, I guess.
Yeah, I was just thinking it could have been a buy the rumor, sell the news if you thought, wow, the PMIs are probably going to be pretty awesome. Let me get into this. The pound goes up to 131.5, and then you sell it on the headlines. But maybe that's too simplistic. We do have, it is still a good day for European stocks. We haven't seen them slump back down, although it's been a tough week. So the CAC Caron is up 1.5% right now. The DAX up 1.33%. The FTSE 100 up 1.4%. So we do see some pretty decent gains across European equity indexes. We also see U.S. futures trading substantially higher. The NASDAQ up. NASDAQ futures are up 0.4%. S&P and Dow Jones mini contracts each up by more than 0.25%. Maybe markets are less concerned about the coronavirus after the WHO decided it wasn't a global epidemic. Right now, I do have to say, unfortunately, the death toll continues to climb. We know now that 26 people have died from the coronavirus, and the Chinese have effectively quarantined 30 million people, or shut down travel in and out of 12 cities. So that's got to have a huge economic impact, you'd think, especially over a holiday like this. Nonetheless, we see investors willing to let go of their 10-year treasuries. The yield there floating up to 1.7464%, buying the dollar against the yen. You can now get less than 110 yen for your dollar at 109.6245. And gold coming back down to 15.59.30 a troy ounce.
Yeah, certainly a really risk-on picture for European markets of various kinds this morning, Matt. Let's talk about another story that I know caught our attention, just breaking in the last hour. The EU and China are forming an alliance to settle trade disputes. They're teaming up with 15 other countries to replicate the World Trade Organization's defunct appellate body. The panel was a sort of Supreme Court for trade, but it's been paralyzed since the US blocked all nominees to its 7-member board. Joining us now from Davos, Bloomberg's WTO reporter Bryce Bashek. And Bryce, good morning to you. This is a fascinating story. Our colleagues in Brussels tell us that we knew the EU was working on something like this, and we knew they were going to be partners, but the fact they managed to get China on board, a country that maybe some in the EU want to launch complaints against, that is what is quite significant about this move.
Yes, good morning, and welcome from sunny Davos, Switzerland. Here, trade officials are gathering to discuss the state of the WTO, and there's a broad recognition that it's broken. The agreement that you mentioned between the EU, China, and 15 other nations aims to create an interim fix to one of the biggest problems with the WTO, the breakdown of the appellate body.
So, Bryce, as a journalist, I have a sensationalist heart. When I see this story, I immediately notice that the U.S. is not involved in this group of countries, and then I start thinking, wow, what if all of the rest of the countries in the world, because of because of Donald Trump's moves to pull back from global trade, form a pact that excludes the U.S. for future, for the future economic growth of the planet. Is that the wrong way to see it?
That's entirely a possibility. There's 164 nations in the WTO. The U.S. may be the economically strongest member, but it certainly has the same voice at the table as everybody else. 2/3 of the WTO members have made statements to say that they disagree with what the United States is doing to the WTO, and they want to help fix it. This interim agreement between the EU, China, and 15 others is a first step in that direction.
And what difference will, the appellate body, as you suggest, has been paralysed since the US blocked all these nominees. Is everybody going to be on the same board? Everyone seems to be, the people who have joined this grouping clearly don't agree with the United States and they want something to replace this defunct body. But are there going to be fault lines that emerge even within this grouping? China doesn't always see eye to eye with Europe on trade.
That's very perceptive of you. Undoubtedly, there will be disagreements here. The WTO's history of negotiations is fraught with breakdowns and false dawns. Here, you have a group of like-minded members, so it's smaller, and it's possible to make an agreement work faster. The larger that group gets, the more disagreements there may be. So it's entirely possible this could take longer than we expect.
Okay, right, Boris, thanks very much. Bloomberg's WTO reporter Boris Bashik joining us there from Davos.
I wanted to say thank you also. Thanks, Bryce. Let's get over now to Leanne Gerrans with World and National News. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. China's virus is not a global problem, not yet anyway. The World Health Organization has decided against declaring the new corona outbreak a worldwide health emergency. That's as the death toll has jumped to 26. Over 10 Chinese cities are now restricting travel. And in the last half an hour, China has ordered all travel agencies to suspend sales of domestic and international tours. That's part of an effort to contain the spread of the virus as the Lunar New Year holiday gets underway. Singapore's Prime Minister says a one country, two systems principle that governs Hong Kong may not last. Speaking to Bloomberg at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he said the government needs to tackle protester concerns over the lack of affordable housing. That said, he doesn't see violent protests resolving these problems.
Well, I can well understand why the protesters are upset, but I can't see how this path is going to lead to improvements in all these difficult problems.
In Italy, a regional election on Sunday threatens to destabilize the Rome government. Matteo Salvini of the League wants to win a key leftist stronghold. If Salvini succeeds, that would trigger turmoil inside Premier Giuseppe Conte's two main parties, the centre-left Democratic Party and the anti-establishment Five Star Movement. But these parties in power dread an early general election because of the League's popularity nationwide. And Turkish President Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to meet in Istanbul later today. As Bloomberg's Simon Demakan explains, Syria will be among the main talking points.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and German Chancellor Angela Merkel are expected to debate the flare-up in violence in Syria's Idlib province, one which could unleash a new wave of refugees. Back in 2016, Turkey and the EU signed an agreement, with Turkey taking responsibility for the migrant crisis. In return, Ankara had a few requirements of its own, and Erdogan is expected to highlight his disappointment to Merkel over the EU's failure to deliver. In Istanbul, Simin Demakan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, let's get over to Pete Fox right now for the U.S. Sports Report.
Basketball in Brooklyn at Barclays. The Nets dropped their fifth in a row, losing to the Lakers and LeBron 128-113. LBJ with 27 in the win. Kyrie posting 20 for the Nets in the loss. Wizards got 36 from Bradley Beal in a 124-112 win over the Cavs in Cleveland. PGA Tour from La Jolla, Keegan Bradley and Sebastian Capella 6 under rounds of 66 to lead. Tiger Woods making his season debut is 3 off the lead after a 69. And from the Australian Open on the women's side, Serena Williams upset in 3 sets by the 27 seed Wong. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Thanks, Pete. We are all up to date on our US sports news now. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Christine Lagarde tells Bloomberg that as the ECB works on its strategic review, policy is still very much up for debate. We'll hear more from our interview with the ECB president in Davos. She refers to herself as an owl, doesn't she, Matt? And she even, I think, touched her owl brooch during our conversation with us. So she's really pushing this. Not a hawk, not a dove, but an owl, apparently.
Yes, she has wisdom. At least the market hopes that she does. Looking at the euro right now, we see it trading for $1.1043, losing a little bit of ground against the dollar. This is Bloomberg.
3, 2, 1. Oh no. Which button am I?
When every second counts, you can't wing it.
Guys, a little help up here?
In a home fire, you may have less than 2 minutes to get out. So make a family home fire escape plan. Then practice home fire drills at least twice a year so everyone knows what to do when they hear. Prepare your family at ready.gov/fire drill. Brought to you by FEMA, the Ad Council, and Make Safe Happen.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology. Data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Want to kit out your new kitchen for less? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all kitchen sinks, taps and appliances when you spend £2,500 on a beautifully designed and affordable good home kitchen. Hurry, offer ends 2nd of February. You can do it when you B&Q it. In-store orders only, maximum 10 appliances, excludes clearance, see DIY.com.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got Handoff Carruthers. Big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown.
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Climate change. Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Danny Berger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now we're seeing more than 1% gains in the Stock 600. Now it is currently trading at a record high. We're seeing U.S. futures not as strong. They're up about 0.3%, but they did have a pretty decent rally yesterday. But leading the gains in Europe are industrial and retail stocks. Elsewhere, we're seeing oil start to steady after its 3-day slide. It's basically unchanged at the moment with WTI just above $55 a barrel. That's after 3 days of losses. A lot of that concerns about global growth on the virus starting in China and spreading elsewhere. Asia markets closed for the Lunar New Year. However, the yen, a currency, of course, still trading, is heading for its first weekly advance in 3. In fact, only the yen and the pound are really gaining against the dollar in terms of G10 currencies for the week. The yen is up 0.5% versus the dollar, whereas the pound is up 0.9%. But on today, the pound is basically unchanged, despite the fact that we had stronger UK January services PMIs. That's starting to put into doubt the BOE rate cut, but a muted reaction from markets. Meanwhile, we're looking at the euro edge lower against the dollar, down 0.1%, as most of the yields across the board moving higher. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Thank you, Danny. European Union bosses have signed Boris Johnson Johnson's Brexit deal at a ceremony in Brussels this morning. Their rubber stamping of the document allows the UK to leave the EU with an agreement next week, almost 4 years after the referendum. The Prime Minister's deal was signed off by the Queen yesterday after completing its journey through Parliament. President Trump says he will release his promised Middle East peace plan before Israeli leaders visit Washington next week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his rival Benny Gantz will go to the White House with Israel gripped by political deadlock. Major issues include the occupied West Bank, whether Palestinians would have a right of return, and whether East Jerusalem could serve as a Palestinian capital. And the doomsday clock is closer to midnight than ever before. Atomic scientists cited the rising nuclear threat and a lack of action on climate change. They moved the clock to 100 seconds to midnight, a 20-second advance. The clock has been maintained since 1947, when it was at 7 minutes to midnight. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
I don't know how. I wonder if the doomsday clock has been running for like 70 years. So are they saying we're closer to the destruction of the imminent destruction of Earth than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
No, just closer than yesterday, I think.
Well, it's saying that it's actually closer to midnight than ever before. But
okay.
I just want everyone to remember that this is a symbolic clock. So it's not real. But we are just to alleviate all concern that we may be raising up there. But yes, apparently we are closer, but we are closer because,
no, we're not. They're just, we're not, obviously, closer to the imminent destruction of the Earth.
The verdict of some atomic scientists is...
Right.
Yes.
Well, it is probably, I guess, more fashionable to say that we're closer to the end now. So, Leanne, thanks very much for that. Leanne Gerrans there with your World National News. Let's get it over to Nathan Hager right now. He's standing by in D.C. Nathan, are you on full nuclear alert there? Are we at DEFCON 1?
Not so much nuclear alert this morning, Matt, but, we do still have overriding concerns about climate change that have been aired out at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Some people arguing that the rise of infectious diseases around the world could be tied to that. And the latest example, perhaps, of that, this ongoing coronavirus outbreak that has, put some jitters in the markets over this week. We're going to have the very latest on what's being done to try to contain the outbreak now with about 40 million people essentially on lockdown. We're going to speak with Ben Emmons of Medley Global Advisors to talk about whether he thinks this could put a dent in the global growth outlook as we head into the better part of 2020. Also, on this final day of the World Economic Forum in Davos, we're going to check in with Bloomberg's Sonali Basak, part of our team of reporters covering the annual gathering of the world's global elites as they talk about how they can confront climate change and some of the other issues that could potentially provide some headwinds for the global economy. And this is a final day for House Democrats to try to make their case to Senate impeachment jurors that they should hear witnesses. We're going to get analysis of the argument so far from Brown University political science chair Wendy Schiller. All that coming up this morning with me and Karen Moscow on Bloomberg Daybreak. Hope you'll join us for it. Matt.
Absolutely will. Nathan, thanks very much. Nathan Hager coming up with Karen Moscow. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Right, now let's get back to Davos. As Nathan was saying, that gathering of the World Economic Forum continuing. It's the final day, of course, and earlier this morning, the European Central Bank President, Christine Lagarde, joined Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix a day after announcing a review of the ECB's inflation goal and policy tools. Francine began by asking what signs should markets be looking at in the review to give us a sense of what's next.
If markets are interested in what happens in the next 12 months, they should not pay too much attention to the strategy review, because we're conducting two separate exercises here. We will have our monetary policy assessment and review as usual. Every 6 weeks, we all get together, we look at the numbers, we look at the markets, we look at the views of the citizens in terms of inflation expectations, and we decide. whether things should be statu quo, whether they should vary one way or the other. And that exercise will be conducted irrespective of the strategy review. So to those who say, oh, it's going to be completely static and stable for 12 months, I'd say, watch out, because things change. And we might have different signals and we might reconsider. We might. I don't know at this point in time. What I know for sure is that it will be two different exercises. And the strategy review will be on its own, on a standalone basis, and will progress because we are looking at what we do in the future, not what we do next week or in May or in July.
That was the ECB President Christine Lagarde speaking to Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix in Davos. Matt?
So I want to get over right now to Caroline Look. She follows the ECB for us, of course, for Bloomberg News out of Frankfurt. She was at the press conference. And what do you take from Lagarde's interview there with Francine Lacroix? She's saying that basically the ECB is data-driven, although there's still a lot of weight on their forward guidance.
Hi, Matt. Yeah, so I think that what President Christine Lagarde is really trying to push back against is this idea that during the course of the ECB's strategic review, no policy changes are possible. She actually called that idea ridiculous, right? And I mean, the view that we see in the market right now that, there's no expected changes in ECB policy for the better part of 2 years is, of course, related to the fact that we've seen some economic improvements and the fact that former President Mario Draghi locked in some, highly stimulative measures right before his term ended. But this view of inaction is also due to the fact that it's quite tricky to gauge what the policy implications of this review will be, right? The general assumption, of course, among a lot of economists is that it's going to lead to a more dovish ECB at the end of this year, but at the same time we hear a lot of talk about housing costs and about the consequences of negative interest rates, which could also imply that we'll end up with a more hawkish ECB. So what seems to be the case is that markets are assuming the ECB would rather do nothing than to take an action and then have to backtrack on it after the review is over.
So it's interesting, isn't it? So she's trying to push against this assumption that many in the market have made that a review means a change in the inflation target, which will allow interest rates to stay lower for longer. Is that the essence here?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's trying to keep it very open, right? She's saying that, their reviews will continue every 6 weeks. They'll see how the economy evolves. If action is warranted, they will do something. But she actually offered very scant views on what exactly they're going to be discussing, and also on her own views on the subject. In our interview, she said she has her own views, but she doesn't want to preclude the debate by airing them now.
Carolyn, what is the market looking for right now, and how well has the market predicted the ECB moves over the time you've been covering it?
I mean, I think what Lagarde was saying about not reading too much into the strategic review is probably going to be quite key for the market, right? I can imagine that over the course of the next year, as these conferences and events take place, during which I assume the ECB will be discussing its various ideas, that investors are going to be looking for clues on, how will this shape up? What kind of ECB are we going to be left with at the end of this? But, a lot of this is also an intellectual exercise. And we've seen this problem, across the world, across central banks, that inflation has just been stubbornly low. And you have to give policymakers time to figure that out.
Carolyn, thank you very much. Yeah, it was interesting listening to Christine Lagarde saying, well, if you're going to have a review, you can't say what the result of that review is going to be. Otherwise, what is the point of having the review? So it looks as if we will be kept waiting for some time until we get the results. Thank you very much. Live from Frankfurt, Bloomberg's Caroline Look.
All right, coming up, if you're listening on Sirius XM, good morning to you. We have Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow up next. More Daybreak to come. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Keys, check. Phone, check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre. so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, January 24th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
China restricts travel for at least 40 million people as the death toll climbs from the coronavirus.
U.S. futures and European stocks gain while markets in Asia close for the New Year holiday.
And shares of Intel climb as cloud computing drives a surge in demand for chips.
House Democrats in President Trump's impeachment trial return for their final day of arguments. Plus, experts say Australia's wildfires will impact the weather. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Serena Williams is out of the Australian Open. Coco Gauff still in. She beat Naomi Osaka. The Lakers beat the Nets.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak on Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Since its founding 50 years ago, SEI has provided investment managers and asset owners with robust infrastructure platforms and flexible outsourcing solutions. Go to SEIC.com/IMS.
And futures are higher this morning. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. With S&P futures up about 7 points, Dow futures up 59, Nasdaq futures up 28, the DAX in Germany's up 1.25%, CAC in Paris up about the same, and the FTSE 100 up 1.6%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 0.1%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up about the same. 10-year Treasury little change, yield 1.73%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.50%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.4% or 24 cents at $55.36 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $4.30 at $15.6730 an ounce. The euro 1.1034 against the dollar. The yen 109.54. Nathan.
All right, Karen, thank you. We begin this morning with the latest developments on the coronavirus out of China. Beijing is rushing to halt the spread of the disease. Here with details is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
The World Health Organization stopped short of calling this a global health emergency. China has implemented restrictions on travel and public gatherings in Wuhan and also in many surrounding areas. And Hong Kong, Macau, and Beijing have canceled holiday activities. Now, most cases remain mild, with only about 1/4 of them developing more severe disease. Most of those who died have had other health conditions. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thank you. A public anger is bubbling up in China. The government restricts travel for 40 million people. We get more from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
Complaints are growing rapidly on social media about everything from a shortage of hospital beds, people getting turned away from being able to see doctors, even if they have a fever, because of the lack of health care, and also expensive grocery prices. And the top levels of government have pledged this all-out effort to contain the outbreak. Even Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang saying this needs to be resolutely curbed, and officials cannot be trying to cover up any of these cases, as was the case during the SARS outbreak.
At least 26 people have now died from the virus, with one victim as young as 36.
Now, as concerns over the virus spread this week, stocks in China fell 4%. So far, there's been little impact on U.S. or European equities and no major concern about the effect on global growth. Tom Orlick is chief economist for Bloomberg Economics.
If in a week's time we're in a world where this is looking like it's escalating, it's going to be easier to put some concrete numbers on the economic impact. It's also possible that in a week's time, this will look much more contained, and we'll be looking at a moderate impact on China's retail sales or services sector, but nothing which looks like a macro impact.
All right, now we've seen Walt Disney temporarily close its Shanghai Disney Resort, while public events to mark the Lunar New Year have been canceled across China.
The impact on stocks was minimal today, with many markets in Asia closed for the holiday. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet. Good morning, Karen. The Nikkei 225 closed slightly higher in Tokyo, while Australia's ASX 200 closed near all-time highs in Sydney. The Hang Seng Index reversed earlier losses to finish slightly higher. Asian stocks snapped their recent winning streak this week, down some 1.2% since last Friday, as the fear of the coronavirus spreading hit tourism, retail and Macau casino stocks. In Singapore, I'm Juliette Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Juliette. Turning to Europe now. Is policy from the European Central Bank on autopilot? Market participants say yes. They currently predict no move from the ECB this year. But President Christine Lagarde is pushing back. She spoke with Bloomberg from the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact-driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be, and I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Markets currently see just a 9% chance the ECB will raise rates this year. Bloomberg customers can access the data by typing WIRP GO on the terminal.
Meantime, PMI data out of Europe show growth remains muted. A composite purchasing managers index for the euro area held at 50.9 in January, falling short of estimates. The manufacturing reading came in at 47.8. That topped expectations, though it remains in contraction territory.
Up next, we get a PMI reading on U.S. manufacturing at 9:45 a.m. on Wall Street. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
2019 was a tough year for manufacturers, and it looks like 2020 is poised for a sluggish start. The closely watched ISM Factory Index has signaled contraction since August. The Federal Reserve, in its Beige Book economic survey, cited job cuts and slower hiring. That said, an easing in trade tensions could provide a buffer in the months ahead. Maybe. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And turning to corporate news now, shares of Intel are gaining after earnings topped estimates. The chipmaker also gave a bullish forecast for the year. Naj Srinivasan covers Intel for Bloomberg Intelligence.
This is the story that we want to see from Intel. We think the numbers are actually still conservative. They've guided up for the next quarter. That is still not fully reflected in the full-year numbers, and the stock is reacting commensurately.
And right now, shares of Intel are up more than 5% in early trading.
8 former executives from Wells Fargo are facing record fines. U.S. regulators are seeking $59 million in fines related to the firm's banking scandal, and former CEO John Stumpf will receive a ban from the industry. We get more from Bloomberg's Lana Nguyen.
Not only is he banned from the industry, he also gets a $17.5 million fine. On top of that, other executives from the company, including the head of the community bank, being fined $25 million. So these are huge numbers. This is something we've never seen before. It's unprecedented, both these levels and also the seniority of the people who are facing these fines.
The former CEO John Stumpf has agreed to the penalty, while Carrie Tolstead, who leads Wells Fargo's community bank, plans to fight hers. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. And it's now 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr to get a check of the latest world and national news headlines. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. On their second day, House prosecutors expanded their case against President Trump during his impeachment trial, arguing his actions to withhold military aid to Ukraine and block a congressional inquiry were clear violations under the U.S. Constitution.
If right doesn't matter, we're lost.
Before finishing up the evening, lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff reiterated that the American people deserve a president they can count on.
And you can't trust this president to do what's right for this country. You can trust he will do what's right for Donald Trump.
House Democrats say Trump's stonewalling puts, quote, Nixon to shame. Republican Senator Rick Scott.
They talk about the same stuff every day. You realize that's all they did with if they've done it now for three days in a row.
Alan Dershowitz, a member of President Trump's legal team and Harvard law professor emeritus, spoke with Bloomberg's June Grasso about the Democrats' impeachment case.
I don't see any case against the president for there to be cracks. The most important thing is whether it charges impeachable offenses, and obstruction of Congress and abuse of power simply are not constitutionally permissible offenses to allow impeachment.
The impeachment trial resumes later today, with the defense presenting their case Saturday. The Trump administration says it is putting new policies in place to prevent pregnant women from entering the United States. President Trump had campaigned on preventing the children of migrants from claiming birthright citizenship. Wildfires in Australia are expected to increase carbon dioxide levels around the world to record levels. The Met Office, which is Britain's official forecaster, said the unprecedented fires raging in Australia may have an influence on weather patterns and global ecosystems this year. The concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is predicted to peak above 417 parts per million in May. Award-winning PBS journalist Jim Lehrer has died at age 85. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, women's tennis at the Australian Open. Two big stories. The loss suffered by 38-year-old Serena Williams, followed by the win achieved by 15-year-old Coco Gauff. Serena with her earliest Aussie Open defeat in 14 years. She had 56 unforced errors. Lost 7-5 in the third to Wang Cheng of China. So Serena stuck on 23 career Grand Slam tournament wins, still one shy of Margaret Court's record.
You know, it's not even about the slams. It's about just me playing good tennis, and I didn't do that today. And that is more disappointing. So it's not even about the win, or it's just more about I'm better than that. And that is what it is for me today.
Gauff, who burst onto the scene at last year's Wimbledon, lost at the U.S. Open to Naomi Osaka, but in a match that just ended, she upset Osaka, the defending Aussie Open champ, 6-3, 6-4. Lakers enjoyed their visit to New York, beat the Knicks at the Garden. Next night, beat the struggling Nets at Barclays, 128-113. LeBron James, 27 points, triple-double. He moved within 15 points of passing Kobe Bryant into third on the NBA's all-time scoring list. Kenny Atkinson's Nets now lost 5 in a row, 10 of 12.
We're not an elite team. I can tell you that. I think we're, obviously went through a tough stretch, and we're surviving right now. I'll continue to say, Brian, that as we get healthier, as we get some, more consistent with our lineups.
Two New York press conferences today, one at Citi Field to welcome in the new Mets manager Luis Rojas, one at MetLife to say goodbye to Eli Manning. Tiger Woods' first round of 2020 was a 3-under 69 at Torrey Pines. He's 3 shots off the lead. The Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
And John, the San Francisco 49ers Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl is just 9 days away. So who better to talk with tonight on the Bloomberg Business of Sports program than the president of the 49ers, Al Guido. Tune in for details of the financial implications associated with your team reaching the big game. You can hear that conversation tonight at 8 and tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio, or anytime when you subscribe to the Bloomberg Business of Sports show as a podcast. S&P futures higher by almost 7 points. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the endless white beaches of Bali. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
3 is a magic number. 300 schemes to help bugs and bees, supporting environmental needs. 8,000 grants for local sports, and performing arts get our support. 7 millionaires every week, the nation's on a winning streak. 30 million pounds to good causes every week. Who'd have thought it? These are magic numbers.
Your numbers make amazing happen. The National Lottery.
Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
The tech IPO market has seen its fair share of highs and lows over the past year, drawing skepticism from companies considering going public. Our direct listings, the new IPO. Bloomberg's Shonali Bossack spoke to NASDAQ CEO Adina Friedman on the health of the public market. Take a listen.
I do think that the underpinning of the economy, certainly in the United States, continues to be very strong. And when you look at the opportunities that exist, the companies that are looking to tap the public markets, it feels like a very healthy environment right now.
So speaking of companies going public, we have so much fewer of them. What are the longer term ramifications of that?
So I think in terms of the last couple of years, we actually had 187 IPOs come to NASDAQ and a 78% win rate last year. So we were very pleased with that. And we had 186 the year before. But you are right that if you compare that, which felt very healthy, to even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, we used to have 300, 400 on a regular basis. So the number of companies are fewer in the public markets, and we do have concerns about making sure that every person has an opportunity to tap the growth potential of great companies that are coming out. So if companies are waiting longer to go public or they're choosing to stay private forever, it does choke off that opportunity to a majority of the population. So we do care deeply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are jumping in Europe while U.S. stock index futures edge higher as investors digest the latest corporate news and promising economic data out of Germany, setting aside for now fears over a deadly virus spreading from China. Oil is steady to lower. It's after a 3-day slide. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. NYMEX crude oil is down about 0.3% now, down 17 cents at $55.42 a barrel. COMEX gold also moving lower, down 0.25%, down $3.90 at $15.6770 an ounce. Futures again higher. S&P futures up about 7 points. Dow futures up 56. NASDAQ futures up 28. The DAX in Germany's up 1.3%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.72%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.51%. The euro is at 1.1035 against the dollar. British pound 1.3105, and the yen is at 109.56. And today we're watching for earnings from companies including American Express. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The struggle over calling witnesses in President Trump's impeachment trial is escalating as House Democrats prepare to wrap up their case today by focusing on White House stonewalling, as they call it. House impeachment managers will will have another day to convince a handful of Republicans to vote with Democrats to subpoena witnesses and documents before Trump's lawyers take the Senate floor to present their case. Health officials are monitoring 2 students from Tennessee Tech and Texas A&M who reported symptoms of coronavirus. Meanwhile, China has moved to lock down at least 3 big cities in an unprecedented effort to contain the virus that has left 25 dead and has spread to other parts of the world. In the NBA, the Nets lost, the Wizards won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mike LeVar. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and Ben Emmons joins us now, global macro strategist at Medley Global Advisors. This very interesting moment for the global economy, Ben, when there have been so many forecasts of slowdown in the global growth picture. Now we're dealing with this coronavirus. China's taking these extraordinary measures to get a handle on it. Is it too soon to say what kind of impact this potential black swan event could have on the global outlook?
Yeah, it is a bit too soon to say, because although the stock market, particularly in China, reacted, of course, very negatively, because that's where probably most of the economic impact initially will be felt, it is unclear how fast it's spreading across the globe and how then the response will be to contain the virus, right? Because I think the economic impact particularly will be from that. The containment will slow down travel in particular, and that could actually have economic effects. So therefore, it's not entirely clear. Nevertheless, it is in a situation I think many investors are monitoring, and therefore there's going to be caution about how this exactly will play out.
What are the potentialities you're looking at, best case or worst case scenarios?
So the best case, of course, is that the containment that they're having put in place right now, which already is quite dramatic in China, it just really limits the spread globally. That's probably the best case. The worst case is that this is actually behind the facts, right? And we're going to see more spreading virus showing up in the United States or in Europe, and then that could start affecting the global sentiment. So far, we're kind of in a very mild situation at the moment. But I think in the worst case would be that we're seeing multiple cases appear in both U.S. and Europe, and I think then the situation becomes very different.
How do you see the European economy right now? We just got PMI data out of the Eurozone this morning that seems to indicate that it's just kind of chugging along, that it's not really doing much of anything.
Well, I think that there was some encouraging PMI data out of Germany in terms of the manufacturing data, because it's really reversing the real depth of that data from last year when the trade war had at its peak. And remember about a year or so ago when the first time when the PMI data was contracting, that people got very concerned about a recession in Germany and maybe a global recession. So it is indicating that actually those fears were unfounded. And this data is now showing some upturn. I think if you look at Germany, same thing is somewhat happening in Asia Pacific. Countries like Korea that has seen upturn in data too. Those two countries are really good examples of how the trade war had played out globally. If there's some recovery happening, then that's actually encouraging. And I think that for Europe, although it's not all green light, it certainly shows that there's some level of rebound happening.
What do you make of President Christine Lagarde's comments to Bloomberg from Davos this morning, pushing back at the idea that the ECB is on autopilot? Are you thinking that we could perhaps see more intervention from the central bank this year?
Well, I think what she was trying to really say was that people maybe have in their mind that the ECB will be on hold forever, right? And I think that she doesn't want to have that in investor minds, because that leads them to that complacency, about that nothing will happen, therefore volatility stays low. And she obviously, it made it really clear this is a data-dependent policy. And when the facts change, the market will have to change its mind too about that the policy ultimately will change, right? And I think that's the message still. And therefore, yes, you cannot exclude that the ECB will change its policy in the future. When exactly, the market now thinks it's about 2021, late 2021, that there could be a rate hike, but it's all depending on this data. So I think that was her message, to make sure that investors understand that.
In our less than a minute here, where do you see Fed policy right now? Is it in the right place?
So that's the same story, actually, right? A lot of there's a somewhat of a maybe complacency about that Fed policy is also on hold, but that there too it's a data-dependent policy. So it may be currently at neutral and appropriate, right? As they say, but just like the ECB, and I would pull in also the BOE and the Bank of Japan, they're actually all in the same boat, right? They deal with the same global uncertainty, the same risks, the coronavirus, and so forth. So I think that all central bank policy being neutral at the moment is, I guess, sufficient, but we have to keep in mind that that's not going to stay that way. There will be changes.
Ben Emmons, always good having you on with us. Thanks for being here. That's Ben Emmons, global macro strategist at Medley Global Advisors, joining us this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. A morning where we're starting to see a bit of buying in global markets, particularly in Europe on the latest economic data there. The stock 600 is up 1.25% right now. As far as futures on Wall Street, they're modestly higher. S&P futures higher by 8 points. Dow futures up 68. And NASDAQ futures a gain of 30 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Bayer may be closer to settling the tens of thousands of claims that its Roundup weed killer causes cancer. Bloomberg has learned that attorneys for some plaintiffs are in talks with the company over a total payout that could reach $10 billion. New York City joins San Francisco and Philadelphia in banning cashless stores and restaurants. The bill, which still needs approval from Mayor Bill de Blasio, would bring penalties of up to $1,500 for violators. A DraftKings fantasy baseball contestant has filed a would-be class action in Manhattan federal court alleging deceptive practices and negligence and seeking damages stemming from the unfolding sign-stealing scandal. Small gains on Wall Street yesterday were enough to push the NASDAQ up 0.2% to a new record high. The S&P 500 wasn't far behind. The Dow closed mainly little changed. U.S. stock futures are rising as investors consider China's restrictions on movement for tens of millions of people to contain a deadly virus. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Dad, I'm doing the mashed potatoes too.
Do the Albert Bartlett potato mash.
Do the twist.
Do the patatas bravas with a British twist.
Yeah. Do the brown sauce, balsamic and chutney.
Oh, do the melting potato slices.
Do the dishes.
Grab a brand new recyclable bag today and do the Albert Bartlett.
He's got a brand new bag.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn.
First jobs, flexible jobs. Keep me out the cold jobs. Advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs. East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs. Start-up jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs. Or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Listen, we know you're not here for ads, but while you're waiting for the music, cybercriminals might be waiting for you to expose your login credentials and payment information over Wi-Fi. Help keep your online activity private with Norton 360. It gives you multiple layers of protection, including secure VPN with bank-grade encryption, device security, password manager, and PC cloud backup. Go to uk.norton.com to get all-in-one protection starting at $24.99 for your first year. Terms apply. That's uk.norton.com.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Eisner-Amper, named Best Global Accounting Firm for the third year in a row by HedgeWeek, a leading hedge fund industry publication. Learn more at eisneramper.com/FS.
And we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are higher to close out a trading week that's been gripped by a deadly virus in China. The country is taking steps to stop the outbreak and is now restricting travel for 40 million people. We get more from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
Cases are now emerging in 32 of China's 34 provinces. One patient as young as 10 years old. And of course, this has spread all across Asia with cases in Singapore, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea. Even though they are instituting this nationwide screening, some infected patients aren't even showing a fever, which shows that the screening and catching of this pathogen is going to be harder than was initially expected.
The virus is blamed for at least 25 deaths, even as the World Health Organization stops short of calling it a global health emergency.
On the economic front, euro area growth remains sluggish to start the year, despite signs of a pickup in Germany. The composite purchasing managers index for the region held at 50.9 in January, coming in below estimates. France was a drag on the reading as labor strikes hit the services sector.
Here in the U.S., we get PMI data for January at 9:45 a.m. Wall Street time. Economists forecast an unchanged composite reading of 52.7.
Here on the corporate front, shares of Intel are up nearly 6% in early trading. The chipmaker reported earnings that topped estimates and gave a bullish forecast for the year. And here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The quarter suggests personal computer demand remains strong and purchasing by data center owners has come surging back. Intel said sales in 2020 will be about $73.5 billion. Analysts were looking for $72.2 billion on average. Fourth quarter revenue also beat the highest Wall Street estimates. Results are being lifted by strong growth in data center chips, steady demand for PCs. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. And coming up today, we get earnings from just 4 companies in the S&P 500, with American Express headlining that list. Futures this morning on the rise. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 7.5 points. Dow futures up 65. NASDAQ futures up 29. The DAX in Germany's up 1.33%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 1.73%. And the yield on the 2-year, 1.51%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% or 17 cents at $55.42 a barrel. And the euro, 1.1038 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has the latest world and national news. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Democratic House prosecutors have made their argument at President Trump's impeachment trial that he abused power like no other president in history. The Democrats say Trump demanded that Ukraine investigate his rival Joe Biden while he withheld crucial military aid as leverage. Lead prosecutor Adam Schiff told senators in a late-night speech, right matters.
No one is really making the argument Donald Trump would never do such a thing. Because of course we know that he would, and of course we know that he did.
Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii.
I think that this is what a bully does, and President Trump exhibits all of the manifestations of a bully.
Also, while during a break, Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa criticized the Obama administration for denying aid to Ukraine.
These House managers did nothing of the sort to provide that assistance to Ukraine, and yet now they are on their high horse about President Trump not doing enough for Ukraine.
Trump's defense team is waiting its turn, which will begin on Saturday. Alan Dershowitz, a member of Donald Trump's legal team and Harvard Law professor emeritus, spoke with Bloomberg's June Grasso about the Democrats' impeachment case against the president.
Is there any president who couldn't be impeached if the House of Representatives had a majority of the other party than the president? I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set to allow a president to be impeached on abuse of power. I'm going to present a list of presidents who have been accused of abusing their power when I speak on Monday.
A new national poll shows Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders running neck and neck among the Democratic presidential candidates. The 7 News Emerson College poll shows the former vice president with 30% support, followed by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders at 27%. Wildfires burning across Australia probably will push the increase in global carbon dioxide emissions this year past record levels. The Met Office, which is Britain's official forecaster, said the fires may have an influence on weather patterns. Alaska's legal marijuana industry has hit a milestone as regulators approve the first retail stores in the state that will be allowed to have customers smoke or consume marijuana products on site. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, out with the old, in with the new. At the Australian Open, 38-year-old Serena Williams ousted in the third round, her earliest departure down under since 2006. She had 56 unforced errors. She lost to Wang Qiang of China. Less than 5 months ago, Serena played Qiang at the U.S. Open, and Serena won 6-1, 6-love. This time, Qiang won 7-5 in the third. She moves on, as does the still only 15-year-old Coco Gauff. What she did last year at Wimbledon, obviously no fluke. Gauff just took out the Aussie Open defending champion Naomi Osaka in straight sets. Golf, Torrey Pines, one of Tiger Woods' favorite courses. He shot 69 in his first round of 2020.
Oh, I definitely was feeling it. I missed the competition, the competing, and trying to keep everything as calm as I possibly could. I didn't do a very good job of that starting out. I made a quick bogey there early, and I felt like I fought back, and a lot of positives hit into the South course.
Tiger 3 shots off the lead. In Brooklyn, LeBron James led the Lakers over the Nets, 128-113, 27 points, triple-double. Needs 15 more points to move into third place on the NBA's all-time scoring list.
To be linked with the greats, that means a lot to me because I grew up and idolizing Michael, idolizing Kobe, idolizing these guys, gaining inspiration from their craft, gaining inspiration from their stories, being a kid, from Akron, Ohio. So that's huge. Anytime I'm linked with the greats or I'm able to do something in my career where I'm mentioned with any of the greats, it's a pretty cool thing.
Out to pass Kobe Bryant. Contract finalized. The Mets will introduce new manager Luis Rojas today. The Giants will say goodbye to Eli Manning. The Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on Tesla CEO Elon Musk taking drastic steps to Silent short sellers. Dana Hull wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
It's this sort of fascinating world of people that are very critical of Musk. Some of them are short sellers. Some of them are just critics.
Read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio and on YouTube, weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, Nathan. New York City officials say a delayed New York City program designed to rebuild homes damaged by Superstorm Sandy needs another $92 million to cover repairs and other work, according to the Wall Street Journal. The city plans to allocate $42 million for the housing program in the coming fiscal year. There are now 10 states offering an incentive for the purchase of an electric vehicle. Once implemented, New Jersey's will be the biggest. The new policy in New Jersey is only available to consumers purchasing EVs priced under $55,000. New Jersey is blocking United Health's Medicaid plan from enrolling new members because of what it calls operational and quality issues. The freeze took effect November 15th, according to a spokesman for the Department of Human Services. The insurer says the freeze came as it took on higher-risk patients. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thanks, Ed. 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. Southwest CEO said he was blindsided as the return of the Boeing 737 MAX slipped to mid-year.
I'm Tom. On KMOX in St. Louis, I'll be reporting on advanced talks by Bayer to settle tens of thousands of claims against Monsanto's weed killer Roundup.
I'm Roger Herring on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the better-than-expected UK PMIs that are making a Bank of England rate cut less likely.
I'm Ed Corey on KFBK in Sacramento. I'm reporting Broadcom has disclosed 2 new agreements to provide parts and modules for iPhones, iPads, and Apple Watches.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Some other stories we're watching. Goldman Sachs is taking a stand against all-white, all-male boards. CEO David Solomon issued an ultimatum from Davos saying Goldman will refuse IPOs unless the company's board has at least one person who is not white, straight, or male. Goldman is the biggest underwriter of initial public offerings in the United States. S&P futures higher by 6.5 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/C.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre. So expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
On a TUI tour, our English-speaking local guides will take you off the tourist trail. They won't just help you find the perfect souvenir, they'll show you how to make it. Choose from over 70 unforgettable tours worldwide. From tranquil temples in India to sunrise safaris in South Africa. On a TUI tour, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Book now and enjoy up to £200 off per booking. Booking T's and C's and minimum spend applies. Selected holidays only. At all protected.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 12-pack of Bird's Eye chicken dippers, now half price, from £2 to just £1. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update. Democratic prosecutors will continue presenting their case later today for removing President Trump from office. Capitol Hill correspondent Manu Raju says it doesn't appear Republicans in the Senate are being moved by the Democrats' arguments, but that doesn't mean they're happy with what the president did.
They're clearly saying that what they are hearing is not an impeachable offense or not anything that warrants removal from office, but a lot of them are not defending the president's conduct either. They're saying the question about his appropriateness of his ask in order to ask the Ukrainian government to investigate a political rival. They're saying it's not a question about appropriateness. It's a question about an impeachable offense.
The defense begins its opening statement tomorrow afternoon. China has begun an unprecedented effort to try to stop the spread of a deadly new virus that's killed dozens of people and sickened more than 800. About 25 million people in at least 3 major Chinese cities are being told not to travel outside their city. I'm Christopher Cruz. Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 5:47 on Wall Street, and futures this morning on the rise with S&P futures up 7 points, Dow futures up 57, Nasdaq futures up 27, DAX in Germany's up 1.25%, 10-year Treasury little change, yield 1.73%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.51%. NYMEX crude oil's down 0.5% or 30 cents at 55.30 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.3% or $4.60 at 15.67 an ounce, and the euro 1.1039 against the dollar. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the impeachment trial against President Trump continues today. Democrats are getting ready to wrap up their opening statements and laying out how they believe President Trump abused his power. The defense team will present their arguments tomorrow. China has moved to lock down at least 3 big cities in an unprecedented effort to contain the deadly coronavirus that has spread to other parts of the world. In the NBA, the Nets lost, the Wizards won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 5:48 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion for a discussion on the European Central Bank. We had a decision from the ECB yesterday. No change in policy. Markets are currently pricing no move from the central bank at all this year. And that has many saying the ECB is on autopilot. But President Christine Lagarde disagrees. She pushed back in an interview with Bloomberg today from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Here's what she had to say.
To those who think that it's autopilot, I think that's ridiculous. There is a forward guidance which is strong, which is setting, a very clear timetable that is fact dependent. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact-driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be, and I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Well, let's discuss now with Marcus Ashworth, Bloomberg Opinion columnist, joining us from our London bureau this morning. Good morning, Marcus. So let's get your reaction to what Lagarde had to say to Francine Lacroix. Is the ECB on autopilot?
Yes, it probably is. What Madame Lagarde said today was what she should have said yesterday, and it's a little bit of an experience there, I think. Draghi wouldn't have done that. He'd have made clear that, and the press conference in the right place where it should be, that type of message should be clearly echoed, but she failed to do it. She had a good start previous month, but I don't think she handled herself very well this time round. And what the market is worrying is that this review, which they've taken such a long time to announce, and then when they announced it was barely one page of purely monetary focused review, so nothing to do with climate change or other factors, that's that underwhelmed, is that this is a cover for her to get up to speed and basically for growth to magically appear from somewhere in the European economy, and that will save the ECB's bacon. Now, that has been the strategy for the last 10 years, and it hasn't worked very well. So Draghi left her with a range of stuff that they can do, from further negative interest rates, more QE again. They've had to reverse that policy, go back to doing QE, and indeed this tiering of deposit rates, which in actual fact is a rate hike. And the one key thing she said yesterday was that bit's working. So weirdly, they'd cut the deposit rate, but practically they've actually raised rates and that indeed the whole yield curve was moved up to reflect that. So I think she's trying to sort of get as much time as possible before the pressure comes on, as it surely will. It always does in Europe. There'll be an Italian crisis. There'll be a banking crisis, or equally the economy is struggling. We just had a bunch of PMI numbers out, which are mixed. It's pretty fair to say there's clearly some services weakness coming, probably Italy and Spain, and clearly in France, though the German numbers were better. So overall, it was a better picture in manufacturing, but a worryingly weaker, which is a much bigger part of the economy, weaker numbers in services. So it's far from clear that the European economy is anything other than struggling still. And we got a review which is supposed to take all year, and she's had to come out and confirm that actually that doesn't mean that they are completely high-bound. But the practical reality, everyone knows that they are, and that they won't come. This review will do nothing other than just slightly changed the wording around a 2% inflation target.
It's interesting that you suggest that Lagarde is almost reviewing her message from day to day, even as the ECB itself is under this ongoing review of this strategy. What do you think Lagarde is doing in her last minute here in sort of tweaking her message from the policy statement of yesterday?
Well, as I said, I think she missed it out, and she's realised. And I was about to write an article saying if the ECB thinks they can get away with it for a year by doing nothing, they've got another thing coming. Mr. Market will come and teach them a lesson. But she saved me my tapping skills, and she's come out with a sensible sounding statement, but she should have said it yesterday. No matter, it's not a biggie. We'll move on. But there is clearly a lot of hope still based in the ECB's approach to life, and this review that they're going to try and waste a year over will do literally nothing. As I said, at the moment it's called a 2% inflation target, or close or near to. They're going to drop that close or near to rubbish and just call it 2%. Well, if that's all going to do after a year of reviewing, then what are we wasting our time for? But that essentially is all it looks like it's going to happen.
A lot more to come to see what the ECB does over this year, if anything. Bloomberg opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth with us from London this morning. Thank you, Marcus. Read more at Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
A proposed class action lawsuit was filed in federal court against Major League Baseball, the Houston Astros, and the Boston Red Sox. A DraftKings fantasy baseball player is suing over the sign stealing scandal. The latest action against Uber and Lyft in California is led by the state's Air Resources Board. It concerns vehicle emissions. And customs officials are looking into whether some Chinese imports were produced by forced labor.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now the big legal story we're watching, the impeachment trial of President Trump resuming today at 1 p.m. with House Democrats presenting their final day of opening arguments. Tomorrow, members of the president's team, including Harvard Law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz, begins his defense. Bloomberg's June Grasso spoke with Professor Dershowitz about the constitutional argument he plans to make for the president, and let's hear what he had to say.
So far, do you see any cracks in the House's case against the president?
I don't see any case against the president for there to be cracks. The most important thing is whether it charges impeachable offenses, and obstruction of Congress and abuse of power simply are not constitutionally permissible offenses to allow impeachment. Virtually every president since Washington has been accused of abusing his power, and presidents obstruct Congress all the time when they invoke executive privilege. So these are not valid allegations for impeachment. So anything else that's going on is just a kind of political show.
Professor, the overwhelming majority of constitutional law scholars, including your own colleagues, Harvard law professors Lawrence Tribe and Noah Feldman, say your position is just plain wrong and that you don't need a crime.
Well, they think it was right if it were Hillary Clinton who were being impeached. In fact, Larry Tribe, when Bill Clinton was president, said categorically sitting president cannot be indicted or charged with a crime. And then magically, when Donald Trump got elected, he changed his mind and said that he could be indicted for a crime. Virtually all of the 500 professors who signed that letter would have signed the opposite letter had the shoe been on the other foot. These are mostly partisan people who will always come down on the side of candidates they support, and they'll make the Constitution fit into the candidates that they support, and they just don't pass what I call the shoe on the other foot test.
Some people are saying that about you. The House Judiciary Chair, Jerry Nadler, played a clip of you from 1998 in which you said, quote, if you have somebody who completely corrupts the office of the president and who abuses trust and who poses great danger to our liberty, you don't need a technical crime.
Well, that's true. You don't need a technical crime, but I've changed my mind on whether or not abusive conduct can be a criteria for impeachment. What happened is during the Clinton days, I was on Clinton's side, there was no issue about whether you needed a crime because they charged him with perjury. They charged him with a crime. The only issue was whether it was a high crime. So So I hadn't done the research on that issue because it wasn't pressing. It wasn't an issue that was being debated. But since this election, when they've been pushing for the impeachment of Trump, who I voted against, I did all the research. I've read all the congressional debates. I've read the Federalist Papers. I've read Blackstone, and I've come to a very different conclusion, that obstruction of justice, obstruction of Congress, and abuse of power are precisely the kind of vague, open-ended, standardless criteria or non-criteria that the framers would have rejected. So I've changed my mind the way Larry Tribe changed his mind, the way Nadler changed his mind.
And that's Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, who's part of the legal team representing President Trump in his impeachment trial. He spoke with Bloomberg's June Grasso late yesterday. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures are up 6 points this morning. Dow futures up 50. NASDAQ futures up 26. The DAX in Germany's up 1.25%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 1.73%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.51%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.4% or 24 cents at 55.35 a barrel. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 6-pack of Mr. Kipling Angel Slices, now half price, from £1.80 to just 90p. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
World, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, January 24th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
China restricts travel for at least 40 million people as the death toll climbs from the coronavirus.
U.S. futures and European stocks gain while markets in Asia close for the New Year holiday.
And shares of Intel climb as cloud computing drives a surge in demand for chips.
House Democrats in President Trump's impeachment trial return for their final day of arguments. Plus, experts say Australia's wildfires will impact the weather. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Serena Williams is out of the Australian Open. Coco Gauff still in. She beat Naomi Osaka. The Lakers beat the Nets.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com.
And U.S. futures are higher to start the final trading day of the week. 6:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 6 points this morning. Dow futures up 57. NASDAQ futures up 28. The DAX in Germany's up 1.25%. CAC in Paris up 1.1%. And the FTSE 100 up 1.5%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 0.1%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up about the same. 10-year Treasury